Tonight, we will explore a collection of life-changing Buddhist teachings, ancient keys that have been passed down through centuries to unlock the mind from its struggle and guide it toward a state of profound and deep sleep. There is nothing you need to do, nothing to learn, and no effort you need to make. These stories work on a level deeper than the thinking mind. A great Zen master once said, "The way is not in the sky, the way is in the heart." In the hours to come, you will not just hear this truth, you will begin to feel it in the very rhythm of your own being. As these gentle tales unfold, you may notice a quiet transformation. The noise of the day will begin to fade. The weight of your worries may feel a little lighter, and the path to a deep and restorative rest will appear before you, clear and inviting. So allow your body to grow heavy and comfortable. Let go of the day that has passed. Let's take one slow, deep breath together now, breathing in a sense of calm, and as you breathe out, release everything you have been carrying. You have done enough. You have arrived. Let us begin. Our first story is about a king who sought the greatest treasure in the world, only to find it in a place he had never thought to look. This is the tale of the king's most precious thing. A powerful king who had storehouses overflowing with gold and jewels felt a deep emptiness in his heart. He summoned the wisest Zen master in his kingdom. "Master," he said, "I have everything, yet I am not happy. I want you to find for me the single most valuable, most precious thing in the entire world. Spare no expense. Bring it to me, and I will be content." The master bowed. "I will do as you command," he said, "but it will take some time." A year later, the master returned to the court. The king rushed to meet him. "Have you found it?" he asked eagerly. "The most precious thing in the world?" "Yes, your majesty," the master replied. He was holding not a jewel or a golden artifact, but a simple, plain wooden cup filled with clear water. He held it out to the king. "Here it is." The king was furious. "This is an insult. I have waited a year, and you bring me a cup of common water." "Please, your majesty," the master said calmly. "Drink." The king, though angry, was also thirsty. He took the cup and drank. As the cool, simple water soothed his thirst, a profound stillness fell over him. For that one simple moment, his restless wanting, his endless seeking, was completely gone. There was only the simple, profound reality of thirst being quenched. "The most precious thing in the world," the master said softly, "is not a thing at all. It is this. The simple, direct experience of the present moment, when met with your full and grateful attention. This cup of water, in this moment, was more valuable to you than all the gold in your treasury. This preciousness is available to you in every single breath, in every sip of tea, in every moment you choose to truly be here for your own life." This simple, life-changing wisdom, which finds the ultimate value in the present moment, is a treasure we all possess. But often, we feel our own value is diminished by our flaws. This brings us to a quiet story about a woman who tended a tree that everyone else had abandoned. This is the tale of the woman and the ugly tree. In a village there grew a gnarled, twisted and ugly plum tree. Its trunk was full of knots, and its branches grew in awkward directions. The other villagers would say, "This tree is useless. Its wood is too crooked to build with, and it never gives any fruit." They ignored it, but a quiet old woman in the village loved the tree. She saw a strange beauty in its twisted form. Every day she would bring it a little water, and she would gently clear the weeds from its base. She did not expect anything from the tree. She simply cared for it. Years passed. One spring, after a long and difficult winter, a single perfect blossom appeared on one of the tree's gnarled branches, and from that blossom grew a single, magnificent plum. It was larger and more beautiful than any plum anyone had ever seen. That same spring, the queen of the land fell gravely ill. The royal doctors tried everything, but she only grew weaker. A wise hermit told the king, "There is only one cure, a fruit that has been grown not with ambition but with pure unconditional love." The king sent his men across the land, and they finally came to the village and saw the single, magnificent plum on the ugly tree. They brought it to the queen. She ate it, and she was healed. The king came to the old woman. "Tell me," he said, "how did you grow this magical fruit?" The old woman simply smiled. "I did not do anything special," she said. "I just saw a lonely, unloved thing, and I gave it a little bit of kindness every day." This story is a gentle teaching about our own ugly trees, the parts of ourselves that we have judged as worthless, flawed, or unlovable. We all have them. But the old woman's wisdom is that these very parts, when met with our own gentle, patient, and unconditional attention, can sometimes bear the most beautiful and healing fruit of our lives. It is often our wounds that give us our greatest compassion. It is our struggles that give us our greatest strength. The life-changing insight is to stop waiting to be perfect and to start offering a simple, loving kindness to the beautifully imperfect being that you already are. This same kindness is what allows us to face the inevitable storms of our lives. This brings us to a story about a monk who learned that the only true refuge is not a place, but a state of mind. This is the tale of the monk and the storm. A young monk was terrified of thunderstorms. Whenever dark clouds would gather, he would be filled with a deep anxiety. He would run to the strongest part of the monastery and hide, his hands over his ears, and he would pray for the storm to pass. His master saw this great fear. One day, as a massive storm was approaching, the master said to him, "Today you will not hide. Your meditation will be to go to the highest, most exposed cliff on this mountain and to simply sit there until the storm is over." The monk was filled with a terror he had never known, but his faith in his master was stronger than his fear. He walked to the cliff edge and sat down. The wind howled, the rain lashed his face. The thunder cracked right over his head, and the lightning lit up the entire world in flashes of brilliant, terrifying white. He sat there, his body trembling. He wanted to run, to hide, to resist, but there was nowhere to go, and so he surrendered. He stopped fighting the storm, he opened his eyes, and he looked right into its wild heart. And a strange thing happened. He began to feel the immense raw power of the storm, not as something that was attacking him, but as something that was moving through him. He felt the wind as his own breath, the rain as his own tears, the thunder as his own heartbeat. In that moment of complete surrender, his fear vanished. He realized he was not a small, fragile man, cowering from a great storm. He was the vast, silent, and unshakable stillness in which the entire storm was happening. This story is a powerful lesson in how to meet the great storms of our own lives, our grief, our fear, our despair. Our instinct is to hide from them, to resist them. But this resistance is what creates our suffering. The Master's radical instruction is to turn and face the storm, to be willing to feel it fully. When we can do this, when we can let go of our resistance and allow the powerful energy of our emotions to move through us, we make a life-changing discovery. We discover that we are not the storm, we are the sky. We are the vast, open and peaceful awareness that is large enough to hold any and all of life's weather without being harmed by it. This same discovery, that we are not the limited character we think we are, is the key to all true freedom. This brings us to a story about a man who lost everything, only to find himself. This is the tale of the actor's last role. There was a great actor who was famous for the many characters he could portray. He could be a king, a beggar, a villain, a saint. He was so skilled that when he was on stage, he would completely forget himself and become the character. His identity was a collection of all the wonderful roles he had played. In his old age, a strange illness befell him. He lost his memory. He could not remember his name, his famous roles, his great successes. He sat in his beautiful home, a complete stranger to himself, his heart filled with a deep and terrifying emptiness. He felt he was no one. A Zen monk who had been a friend of his came to visit. The old actor looked at him with empty eyes. "I don't know who I am," he whispered. "I have lost everything." The monk looked at him, his face full of a deep and gentle peace. "You have not lost everything," he said softly. "You have only lost your characters. For 50 years you have been wearing magnificent costumes, but you have forgotten the one who was wearing them. Now all the costumes are gone. You feel you are no one, but for the first time in your life, you are free to simply be. This emptiness you fear is not a lack. It is your true home." This story is a profound teaching on the nature of our identity. We are all, in a way, actors playing roles. We identify with our jobs, our family positions, our histories, our personalities. We believe that this collection of roles and memories is who we are. The actor's loss of memory is a metaphor for the spiritual practice of letting go of these fixed identities. It can feel terrifying, like a kind of death, but the monk's wisdom points to a great liberation. When we can let go of the need to be someone important, someone successful, someone with a particular story, we discover a deep and peaceful presence that lies beneath all those roles. This is the simple, open and aware being that is our true and unchanging nature. This same deep, quiet being is the source of all true art, a lesson we learn from a musician who found his greatest song only after he had broken his instrument. This is the tale of the master musician's final concert. A master of the lute was to give the final concert of his long and illustrious career. The emperor and the entire court had gathered to hear his legendary skill. He came onto the stage, sat down, and played a piece of music so technically perfect, so complex and brilliant, that the audience was breathless. His fingers flew across the strings, a demonstration of a lifetime of discipline. When he finished, there was a stunned silence, and then a great roar of applause. The emperor himself stood up. "Master," he said, "that was the most perfect music I have ever heard. You are truly the greatest musician of all time." The old musician bowed. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said. "That was the music of my hands. Now, if you will allow me, I would like to play you the music of my heart." And then, to the absolute horror of the entire court, he lifted his priceless, magnificent lute, and he smashed it on the stage, breaking it into 100 pieces. The audience gasped. The emperor was speechless. The master then simply sat in the midst of the wreckage of his life's work, and he closed his eyes. He did not move. He just sat in a state of profound and deep silence. And into that silence, the sounds of the world began to enter. The gentle sigh of the wind in the palace eaves, the distant cry of a night bird, the soft, rhythmic breathing of the people in the hall. All the simple, ordinary and beautiful sounds that had been there all along, but that no one had been quiet enough to hear. He sat this way for a long time. Finally he opened his eyes. "That," he said, "was my final song." This story is a radical Zen teaching on the difference between doing and being, between the creations of the ego and the reception of the spirit. The musician's first performance was a masterpiece of skill, of full hands. But his second performance, the one that came after he had destroyed his own identity as a great musician, was a masterpiece of presence, of empty hands. He taught the court that the most beautiful music is not the music we make, but the music that is already here, the music of life itself, which we can only hear when we ourselves become silent. This ability to find beauty not in our own creations, but in the reality of what is the key to transforming our deepest wounds. This brings us to a quiet story of an artist who learned that our mistakes are often our greatest teachers. This is the tale of the weaver and the dropped shuttle. A master weaver was creating a great tapestry that she intended to be her masterpiece. She was weaving a scene of a perfect sunlit sky with threads of gold, silver, and 100 shades of blue. Her concentration was absolute, her skill perfect, but as she was working, her hand slipped, and she dropped a shuttle. It was the shuttle that held a single thread of the deepest, darkest black. The black thread fell across the brilliant sky of her tapestry, creating a long, dark, and undeniable flaw. She cried out in despair. Her masterpiece was ruined. She was about to take a knife and cut the entire tapestry from the loom to destroy her failure. Just then, her old Zen master, who had been watching from the corner of the room, spoke. "Wait," he said. "Do not fight with what has happened. See if you can invite it to be a part of the dance." The weaver, with a heavy heart, looked at the ugly black line. She did not know what to do, but she took the master's advice. She did not try to remove the thread. Instead, she began to weave around it. She took the black thread, and from it she began to weave the shape of a single graceful bird soaring across the sunlit sky. And when she was finished, she saw that the accidental black thread, the flaw she had despaired over, had become the very heart of the entire piece. It was the one touch of life, of dynamic reality that transformed her technically perfect scene into a true masterpiece. This story is a beautiful teaching on how to work with the mistakes and unexpected events of our own lives. We all have a picture in our minds of how our life's tapestry should look, and when an unexpected black thread appears, a sickness, a loss, a failure, our first instinct is to see it as a flaw, as something that has ruined the picture. We despair and we want to cut it out. But the Master's wisdom is to invite it to be a part of the dance. It is the practice of creative acceptance. It is to ask, how can this unexpected event, this flaw, be woven into the larger pattern of my life in a way that creates a new and deeper beauty? When we can meet our life's accidents with this kind of creative and open heart, we can discover that our greatest wounds can often become the source of our greatest wisdom and our most beautiful art. This same wisdom of surrender, of working with the flow rather than against it, is the theme of our next story. It is a tale of a monk who believed he had to conquer a river, only to learn that the river was his greatest teacher. This is the tale of the monk who fought the river. A strong and determined monk had a single great ambition to build a bridge across a wide, powerful and dangerous river that separated his monastery from a poor village. He saw it as his great spiritual task. For years he worked. He would try to sink great stone pillars into the riverbed, but the powerful current would always wash them away. He would try to build great wooden structures, but the spring floods would always smash them to pieces. He was fighting the river, using all his strength and willpower, but the river was always stronger. He grew old and weary in his long and fruitless battle. One day, an old ferrywoman, who had spent her life rowing her small boat back and forth across the river, came to him. "Good monk," she said, "I have watched you fight my river for 40 years. You see the river as your enemy. That is why you will never defeat it. I do not fight the river. I have spent my life listening to it. I know its moods, its secret currents, its deep and its shallow places. The river is not my enemy. It is my partner. It tells me where it is safe to cross. You are trying to force your own path. You have never stopped to ask the river where the path already is." The old monk listened to her words, and for the first time he let go of his long and bitter struggle. He sat by the river for a month, and he did not try to build, he just watched. He learned to see the way the water flowed, the path of least resistance, and then he built a new kind of bridge, a light and flexible bridge made of woven reeds, a bridge that did not fight the river, but danced with it, and it held. This story is a profound teaching on the difference between the way of the ego and the way of the Tao. The monk's initial approach was one of struggle, of imposing his will on reality. This is how we often approach our problems, and it leads to exhaustion and failure. The ferrywoman embodies the wisdom of water itself. She does not fight, she harmonizes, she listens, she adapts, she finds the natural flow. The life-changing insight is to stop treating life as an adversary to be conquered. When we can quiet our own will and learn to listen to the currents of a situation, we can often find a path forward that is both effortless and effective. This same effortless path is revealed not through great striving, but through the simple act of service. This brings us to a story about an artist who was searching for the face of enlightenment, only to find it in the most humble of places. This is the tale of the sculptor and the eyes of the Buddha. A sculptor had been commissioned to carve a great statue of the Buddha for a new temple. He was a master craftsman, and he worked for years on the piece. The body was perfect. The robes flowed like real silk. The hands were held in a gesture of profound peace, but he had left the eyes blank. He could not carve them. He did not know what the eyes of a truly enlightened being should look like. He went on a long pilgrimage, searching for the answer. He looked at the eyes of powerful kings, of brilliant scholars, and of revered saints, but none of them seemed right. He grew discouraged and felt he would have to abandon his great work. He was returning home, his heart heavy, when he passed through a village that was suffering from a great famine. He saw an old homeless woman sitting by the side of the road, sharing her last tiny piece of bread with a stray dog. The sculptor stopped and watched. He looked into the woman's eyes, and in them he saw no pride, no desire, no fear. He saw only a deep, simple, and unconditional compassion. In that moment he saw the eyes of the Buddha. He rushed back to his studio, and with a heart full of this living image, he picked up his tools, and he carved the eyes of the statue, not from his memory of a book, but from his experience of a simple, selfless, and loving heart. This story is a beautiful teaching on where true wisdom is found. The sculptor was looking for enlightenment in the high places of the world, in the grand and the impressive, but he found it in the most humble of places, in a simple act of selfless giving. The story teaches us that compassion is not a concept, it is the very eyes of awakening. True wisdom is not a cold, detached understanding of the world. It is a warm, engaged and loving heart that sees the suffering of others and responds without a second thought. The sculptor could not think his way to the answer. He had to experience it. He had to see it lived. This same need to see the truth directly, rather than just thinking about it, is at the heart of our next story. It is a tale of a monk who believed his mind was his greatest tool until he learned the wisdom of his own hands. This is the story of the monk and the unplanted seeds. The young monk was a brilliant theorist. He had studied all the ancient texts on agriculture, and he could speak for hours on the proper way to cultivate a bountiful harvest. He knew the right soil, the right amount of water, and the right time to plant. One spring, the monastery was given a barren, rocky field. The abbot assigned this field to the scholar monk. "You know more about planting than anyone," the abbot said. "Make this field fruitful." The scholar monk was pleased. He spent weeks preparing. He drew up elaborate charts of the field. He wrote a long and brilliant treatise on the best way to clear the rocks and enrich the soil. He gave lectures to the other monks on his theories, but he never actually touched the ground. Meanwhile, an old, simple-minded monk, who knew nothing of theories, would go out to the field every day with a bucket. He could not clear the whole field, so he would just clear one small patch, the size of his own robe. He would pull out the rocks with his bare, gnarled hands, and he would carry rich soil from the riverbank to enrich his little patch. It was slow, hard work. At the end of the spring, the scholar monk had a perfect and brilliant plan, but the field was still barren. And in the middle of that barren field, there was one small, vibrant green patch where the old monk's seeds were joyfully sprouting. This story is a simple but powerful Zen critique of intellectualism that is divorced from action. The scholar monk represents the mind that can get so lost in planning, in theorizing, in perfecting the idea of a thing that it never actually does the thing. His knowledge was useless because it was never put into practice. The old monk, on the other hand, embodies the spirit of direct, simple, and patient action. He did not have a grand plan, he just did the small, necessary work that was in front of him, day after day. The story teaches us that wisdom is not found in what we know, but in what we do. A single, small, and compassionate action is worth more than 1,000 brilliant theories. The path to a fruitful life is not in having a perfect plan, but in the simple, humble, and persistent work of planting one good seed at a time. This same direct, uncomplicated approach to life is the theme of our next story. It is a tale that brings us back to the very beginning, to the simple, profound, and often missed miracle of our own inner world. This is the story of the master's last painting. A great Zen master, who was also a famous painter, was very old and knew he was dying. His disciples gathered around him for his final teaching. "Master," they asked, "what is the ultimate truth you have discovered through your long life of art and meditation?" The master, who was too weak to speak, motioned for a brush, ink, and a large sheet of white paper. His disciples set it before him. With the last of his strength, he dipped the brush in the black ink. His hand trembled. The disciples leaned in close, expecting him to paint a majestic mountain, a wise dragon, or perhaps the profound and simple circle of the Enso. But the master did not paint a picture. He simply held the brush, loaded with black ink, over the center of the pure white paper, and he did nothing. He just held it. A single large black drop of ink formed on the tip of the brush. It grew heavier and heavier, and then it fell, landing on the white paper with a soft splat. It was not a perfect circle. It was an irregular, living, and beautifully imperfect blot. The master looked at the single black dot on the vast white page. A look of profound peace and satisfaction came over his face. He put down the brush, and then he was gone. His disciples stared at the painting. It was his final sermon, and they understood. The entire universe, all the teachings, all the complexity was contained in this one simple, direct, and perfectly imperfect moment. The black dot was everything. The white paper was everything. It was not an idea, it was just this. The ultimate truth was not a grand picture, but the simplest possible reality, met with a complete and accepting heart. That single, imperfect ink blot. A final sermon containing the whole of reality reminds us that truth is not in complexity, but in stark simplicity. This same simplicity is often the key that unlocks the door of our own heart, as our next story reveals. It is a tale of a man who believed his value was in his cleverness, and the single word that showed him a different way. This is the story of the man who counted the stars. There was a man who was a brilliant astronomer. He spent his nights in a high tower, with a great brass telescope, mapping the heavens. He knew the names of all the constellations, the paths of the planets, and the cycles of the comets. He was very proud of his vast knowledge, and he felt that by naming and measuring the universe, he somehow understood it. But he was not a happy man. His mind was always busy, always calculating, always categorizing. He had no time for simple joy. One night, a Zen master came to visit him in his tower. The astronomer, eager to impress, began to point out the stars. "That is Vega," he said, "and that is the great Andromeda galaxy, containing 1,000,000,000,000 suns." The master listened patiently. When the astronomer had finished, the master simply pointed to a single bright star hanging in the velvet darkness. "What do you feel," he asked, "when you look at that one?" The astronomer was taken aback. "Feel? I do not feel anything. I am a scientist. I observe and I record." "Try," the master said gently. The astronomer for the first time lowered his telescope. He let go of the names, the numbers, and the charts. He simply looked at the single brilliant point of light. He did not try to analyze it. He just received its light. And as he did, a feeling of awe, of wonder, of a vast and profound mystery washed over him. It was a feeling more real and more true than all the knowledge he had ever accumulated. "The names are not the stars," the master said softly. "The knowing is not in the counting." This story is a quiet teaching on the two ways of knowing, the way of the intellect and the way of the heart. The astronomer represents the mind that seeks to understand the world by measuring, labeling, and categorizing it. This is a powerful and useful way of knowing, but it can also create a distance, a separation between us and the living reality of the world. The master's gentle question is an invitation to the other way of knowing, direct, intuitive, and felt experience. It is the wisdom that arises not from thinking about the world, but from simply being with it. The story reminds us that while knowledge is valuable, it is in the moments of simple, thought-free wonder that we often touch the deepest truths. This same simple, direct truth is often the most difficult for us to accept, especially when it comes to our own lives. This brings us to a story about a woman who spent her life searching for a perfect path, only to find it under her own 2 feet. This is the tale of the woman and the perfect path. There was a woman who was a devout seeker of the truth. She read in an ancient text about a legendary perfect path, a hidden trail that, if followed, would lead directly to a place of eternal peace and happiness. She became obsessed with finding this path. She left her home and her family and began to search. She traveled for many years. She walked on dusty roads, on sharp mountain trails, and on soft forest floors. She was always looking for the one special, perfect path. She would start on a path, but soon she would find a flaw. It was too rocky, too steep, or it didn't seem to be leading in the right direction. And so she would abandon it and search for another. Her life became a series of beginnings without any real journey. Old and weary, she came to a small hermitage where a wise old Zen nun lived. "Venerable mother," she said, her voice full of a lifetime of disappointment, "I have searched my whole life for the perfect path, but I have not found it. Where is it?" The old nun looked at the woman's worn-out sandals and her tired, dusty feet. "You have been walking on it your entire life," she said, her voice full of a deep and gentle kindness. "The perfect path is not a place you can find. It is the way you choose to walk the path you are already on. The perfection is not in the road, it is in your own 2 feet. This story is a profound and life-changing teaching for all of us who feel that we are on the wrong path, that if only our circumstances were different, then we would be happy. We are always looking for the perfect job, the perfect relationship, the perfect life, believing that it exists somewhere else. The nun's wisdom is a radical call to presence. It is the realization that the only path we will ever have is the one that is unfolding under our feet in this very moment. The spiritual journey is not about finding a different road. It is about learning to walk this one with a different quality of attention, with awareness, with kindness, with an open heart. When we can do this, we discover that any path, no matter how rocky or how ordinary, can become the perfect path. This same ordinary path is often where we find our greatest teachers, as our next story reveals. It is a tale of a proud monk who was humbled by the wisdom of a simple creature. This is the story of the monk and the spider. A monk named Shensho was very proud of his deep understanding of the Buddhist concept of karma. He could lecture for hours on the intricate web of cause and effect that governed all of existence. He saw himself as a great teacher. One rainy afternoon, he was walking in the monastery garden when he saw a large spider's web glistening with raindrops. In the center of the web sat a large, patient spider. Shensho, in a moment of idle cruelty, took a small stick and tore a large hole in the beautiful, intricate web. "Let us see your karma now," he sneered, and he walked on. The next morning he passed by the same spot. He saw that the spider had worked all night, and the web was completely repaired, perfect and whole once more. Shensho felt a pang of annoyance at the creature's persistence. He tore the web again, this time more severely. On the 3rd morning he returned to find the web perfectly repaired again. The spider sat in the center, unmoved. It did not seem angry or discouraged. It simply did what a spider does. It mended its world. Shensho stood there, and for the first time he felt a deep sense of shame. He, the great scholar of karma, had spent his days creating destruction. This tiny, simple creature, who had never read a single sutra, had spent its nights in patient, tireless creation. The spider had not complained about its fate. It had not despaired. It had simply met the reality of its broken world with the skillful action of repair. In that moment, the spider became his master, and he became its humble student. This story is a simple but powerful teaching on the nature of right action. We can have all the brilliant theories in the world about how life works, but true wisdom is demonstrated in our direct response to the challenges of the present moment. The monk represents the mind that can become arrogant and destructive even when it is full of spiritual knowledge. The spider represents our own innate Buddha nature. It is the part of us that when our world is broken does not fall into despair, but simply and patiently begins the work of mending. It is the resilient, creative, and non-complaining spirit that is at the heart of a truly awakened life. This same quiet, patient work is what allows us to see the world not as a problem, but as a gift. This brings us to a story about a master who taught his most profound lesson with a simple, everyday object. This is the tale of the master's gift of a rock. A wealthy and important man came to a Zen master. He was a man who was used to giving and receiving valuable gifts. He brought the master a magnificent embroidered silk robe. "Master," he said, "I have brought you this gift to show my respect." The master accepted the robe with a simple bow. He then bent down, picked up a plain, ordinary grey rock from the path, and handed it to the wealthy man. "And I have a gift for you," he said. The man was deeply insulted. He was holding a common, worthless stone. "This is your gift?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief. "A rock?" "Yes," the master said calmly. "But it is a very special rock. I want you to take it home, and for 1 week, your only spiritual practice is to be with this rock. You must carry it with you everywhere. When you eat, you must place it on the table. When you sleep, you must place it by your bed. And you must spend at least 1 hour each day doing nothing but holding it in your hands and giving it your full, undivided attention. Do not think about it, just be with it." The man, though he thought the master was a fool, was intrigued. He did as he was told. At first it was boring. But as the days passed, a strange thing happened. As he held the rock, he began to truly see it for the first time. He saw the tiny sparkling flecks of crystal within it. He felt its surprising coolness, its perfect smooth weight in his hand. He saw the faint ancient lines that told the story of its long journey. The rock was no longer a worthless thing. It had become a universe of subtle and profound beauty. He realized that the rock had not changed at all. What had changed was the quality of his own attention. He had learned that anything, when met with a deep and patient presence, can become a source of wonder. This story is a beautiful teaching on the nature of mindfulness and the source of true value. We live in a world that teaches us to value the rare, the expensive and the impressive. We overlook the simple, the common and the ordinary. The Master's gift of a rock is a radical invitation to find the extraordinary in the ordinary. The secret of the rock was the man's own attention. The story teaches us that the richness of our lives is not determined by the quality of our experiences, but by the quality of our presence with our experiences. This same quality of presence is often found not in what we do, but in the quiet spaces in between. This brings us to a tale of a musician who learned that the most important part of his art was the part he had always ignored. This is the story of the music in the silence. There was a young musician who was a master of the flute. He could play faster and more brilliantly than anyone. His concerts were a dazzling display of his technical skill, a waterfall of notes played with incredible speed and precision. People were amazed by his virtuosity, but as he grew older, he felt that something was missing from his own music. It was brilliant, but it had no soul. He went to an old Zen master, who lived in a simple hut. He played his most brilliant piece for the master. When he was finished, the master was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Your music is full of beautiful notes, but it has no room for the music to breathe. Yet you have forgotten the most important note of all." "What is that?" the musician asked. "The silence between the notes," the master replied. "The silence is what gives the notes their shape, their meaning, their emotional power. You are so busy playing the notes that you are not playing the silence. Go home and for 1 month practice playing only the silence." The musician did not understand, but he obeyed. He would sit with his flute, but instead of playing, he would become deeply aware of the silence in the room. He would raise the flute and feel the silent pause just before the first note would be born. He would play a single note, and then he would listen with all his being as its sound dissolved back into the great vast silence from which it had come. He learned that the silence was not an emptiness to be filled, but a living, vibrant presence. When he finally gave another concert, his music was transformed. He played fewer notes, and he played more slowly. But his music now had a depth, a soul, and a profound, heartbreaking beauty that it had never had before. He had learned to play the silence. This story is a beautiful metaphor for the rhythm of our own lives. We are often like the young musician, believing that a full and happy life is one that is filled with activity, with notes. We rush from one task to the next, from one experience to another, and we can become afraid of the empty spaces, of the moments of silence and stillness. But the Master's wisdom is that it is in these very spaces that the meaning and the beauty of our lives are found. The silence is our own capacity for quiet, receptive awareness. It is the still background of our being against which the notes of our life's events play out. The story is an invitation to value the pauses, to cherish the moments of stillness, and to discover the deep restorative music that can only be heard when we ourselves become quiet. This same quietness is what allows us to see our own minds with clarity. As our next story shows, it is a tale of a monk who was at war with himself, and the simple truth that brought him peace. This is the story of the 2 wolves. An old Cherokee chief was teaching his grandson about life. "A great fight is going on inside me," he said to the boy. "It is a terrible fight, and it is between 2 wolves. One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego." He continued, "The other is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside you and inside every other person too. The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf will win?" The old chief simply replied, "The one you feed." This ancient story, which has been embraced by so many wisdom traditions, is a simple but life-changing teaching on the power of our own attention. It shows that our inner life is not a fixed thing, but a dynamic process that we are actively creating in every moment. The two wolves are the two great potentials of the human mind, the potential for reactivity, negativity, and suffering, and the potential for peace, kindness, and wisdom. The story's profound insight is that neither of these wolves has inherent power over the other. Their strength is determined entirely by what we choose to feed with our attention. When we spend our days dwelling on our grievances, rehearsing our worries, and indulging in self-pity, we are feeding the wolf of suffering. When we intentionally cultivate gratitude, when we practice forgiveness, when we turn our attention to the simple beauty of the present moment, we are feeding the wolf of peace. This is not about suppressing the bad wolf. It is about actively and wisely nourishing the good one. The story is a deeply empowering reminder that we are not the helpless victims of our own minds. We are the gardeners of our own hearts. This same power of the heart is what allows us to see beyond our own limited needs, a lesson we learn from a master who gave his greatest teaching in an act of simple, selfless service. This is the story of the master's last meal. The Zen master was very old, and he knew that his death was near. He had taught for 60 years, and his disciples were all now great teachers in their own right. They gathered around him for his final days, their hearts full of a mixture of reverence and sorrow. On his last day, he was too weak to get up. A young novice was given the honor of bringing the master his final meal, a simple bowl of plain rice porridge. The novice carried the bowl with trembling hands. He knelt beside the master, but the master was so weak he could not lift the spoon to his own lips. The novice, his heart overflowing with love and compassion, gently took the spoon, and with a slow, tender, and complete attention, he began to feed his master, one small spoonful at a time, just as a mother would feed her own small child. The master, with great effort, ate a few small mouthfuls. Then he closed his eyes, and a single tear of pure gratitude rolled down his cheek. He had given thousands of profound and eloquent lectures in his life, but in that one simple final moment, he was not the great teacher giving a lesson. He was the humble student, receiving a simple act of love, and in that silent exchange, the roles of master and student, of giver and receiver, completely dissolved. There was only the simple, profound, and sacred act of one being caring for another, and that was the final sermon. This story is a beautiful and moving teaching on the nature of service and the culmination of the spiritual path. It shows that the goal of all our practice is not to become some great, separate, and enlightened being. It is to become so empty of our own self-importance that we can meet the simple need of the present moment with a simple and a loving heart. The novice's act of feeding his master was not a chore. It was the purest expression of the Dharma. In that moment he was not a novice, and the master was not a master. They were just two human beings connected by a simple act of care. The story reminds us that the greatest truths are not found in our most profound thoughts, but in our most simple and loving actions. This same loving action is often a process not of addition, but of gentle subtraction. This brings us to a quiet story of a man who learned that the greatest art is in knowing what to leave out. This is the tale of the sculptor's breath. A sculptor was carving a great statue of a reclining Buddha from a huge block of jade. He had been working on it for 10 years, and it was nearly complete, but he was struggling with the final, most important part, the Buddha's face. He wanted to capture an expression of perfect, serene, and unconditional peace. He would carve for a few hours, and then, dissatisfied, he would chip away his own work. His studio was filled with hundreds of failed, discarded heads. His students were worried. "Master," they said, "you will destroy the whole block of stone. You must stop trying to be so perfect." One day the master, in a state of deep frustration, put down his tools. He simply sat before the great, half-finished statue. He did not try to think. He He did not try to solve the problem. He just sat and he breathed. He watched his own breath flowing in and flowing out, a gentle, silent rhythm. He sat this way for an entire day. The next morning, he picked up a single, small, fine-tipped chisel. He walked to the statue, and he did not carve a mouth or a nose or a chin. He just made one single, tiny, almost invisible chip of stone fall away from the corner of the Buddha's left eye. And then he put down his tool and said, "It is finished." His students gathered around, and they saw that he was right. In that one simple act of subtraction, in that one tiny detail that suggested a profound inner world, the entire face of the statue had been transformed. It now held a stillness, a depth, and a peace that was breathtaking. He had not needed to add anything more. He had just needed to take away the one last thing that was not needed. This story is a deep Zen teaching on the nature of simplicity and the art of letting be. We often think that to create peace or beauty, we need to add things, more techniques, more knowledge, more effort. But the sculptor's final breakthrough came not from adding, but from a profound and patient act of subtraction. He had to stop doing and simply be with his own breath until he found the one essential and quietest touch. This is a powerful metaphor for our own inner work. We are often trying to add more to ourselves, more good qualities, more spiritual experiences. But the path to peace is often one of subtraction, of gently letting go of what is not essential, the unnecessary worry, the harsh self-judgment, the old heavy story. It is in this gentle letting go that our own true peaceful and radiant nature is revealed. This same radiant nature is often found only when we are willing to embrace our own vulnerability. This brings us to a quiet tale. It is a story about a monk who believed his strength was in his silence until he learned the greater strength of his own voice. This is the story of the monk who learned to sing. There was a monk who had taken a vow of absolute silence. For 20 years, he had not spoken a single word. He believed that this silence was the highest form of spiritual practice, a fortress that protected him from the messy emotional world. He was seen by others as a man of great discipline and profound stillness. One day, a small child wandered into the monastery and fell into the deep, cold well in the central courtyard. The child was drowning. The monks all ran about in a panic, shouting for ropes and ladders. The silent monk was there, and he saw what was happening. And in that moment, his 20 years of practiced silence, his identity as the silent one, meant nothing. A sound, a cry of pure, unthinking and desperate compassion tore from his throat. It was a roar of pure animal love, a sound that came from a place deeper than any vow, and that sound, that great, loving roar, so startled the other monks that it broke them from their panic, and they were able to quickly and effectively rescue the child. Later that day, the monk went to his master, his face full of shame. "I have failed," he said, his voice rusty and strange from 20 years of disuse. "I have broken my vow. I am not a silent one." The master looked at him, and his eyes were full of a love and a respect that the monk had never seen before. "No, my friend," the master said. "Today, for the first time, you have truly found your voice. For 20 years, your silence was a beautiful fortress. But today, your love was strong enough to break down the walls of your own perfect practice to save another. Your silence was your great discipline, but your cry was your enlightenment." That single compassionate cry, which broke a lifetime of perfect silence, teaches us that true wisdom is not found in rigid rules, but in a flexible and loving heart. This same flexibility is often the key to navigating the unpredictable currents of our own lives, a lesson we learn from a man who tried to control the very river he was travelling on. This is the tale of the man in the boat. A man was rowing his boat upstream against a strong current. He was a man of great determination, and he was completely focused on his destination. He rowed with all his might, his muscles straining, his face a mask of effort. He saw the river as an adversary, an obstacle to be overcome. Suddenly, he felt a hard jolt. Another boat had drifted down the current and bumped into his. He was filled with a hot surge of rage. "Who is this lazy fool," he thought, "who is just drifting aimlessly and has gotten in my way?" He turned, ready to shout and curse at the person in the other boat. But as he looked, he saw that the other boat was empty. It had simply come untied from the shore and was being carried by the same current he was fighting against. In that instant, his anger had nowhere to go. There was no one to blame. It was just an empty boat being moved by the river, and a profound realization washed over him. The anger he felt was not in the other boat, it was in him. He saw that his own struggle, his own fierce resistance to the natural flow of the river, was the source of all his tension and frustration. He had been fighting with an empty boat his entire journey. He stopped rowing, he laid his oars down, and for the first time he allowed his own small boat to be turned by the current and to simply float. A deep sense of peace, of release, and of effortless movement filled him. This famous Zen story is a powerful metaphor for how we relate to the events and people in our lives. We are often like the man, rowing furiously upstream against the natural flow of reality, trying to force our own destination. And when an empty boat, an unexpected event, a difficult person, a frustrating circumstance bumps into us, we react with anger and blame. We believe the problem is out there. But the story's great insight is that our suffering is not caused by the empty boat. It is caused by our own resistance. The practice is to learn to see the empty boats of our lives for what they are, impersonal events, being carried by the great impersonal current of life. When we can see this, our anger has no place to land. We can let go of the oars of our own struggle and learn to float with a deeper wisdom and a greater peace. This same wisdom which comes from letting go of our struggle is often found only when we are willing to embrace our own not knowing. This brings us to a quiet story about a student who sought a final answer, and a master who gave him a living question. This is the tale of the master's only question. A student had been with his Zen master for 30 years. He had practiced diligently, and he was seen by all as the master's successor. But he felt he had not yet had the final, definitive insight. He went to the old master, who was sitting in his garden. "Master," he said, "I have been with you for 30 years. I have followed all your teachings. Please, before you leave this world, tell me, what is the most essential, the ultimate, the final truth of Zen?" The old master, who was quietly watching a spider spin its web, did not answer for a long time. Then he turned to his student, his eyes both clear and full of a deep, endless mystery. "I do not know," he said. The student was devastated. "You do not know, but you are the great master. You are enlightened." "My dear friend," the master said gently, "the mind that knows is a mind that is finished, a mind that is closed. To live in a state of I know is to live in a beautiful, well-lit, but very small room. I have spent my life learning how to leave that room. The final truth is not an answer. It is the courage to live in the vast, open and wondrous field of I do not know. The answer you are looking for is not a thing to be found. It is a space to be inhabited. This story is a deep teaching on what is called don't know mind. We are conditioned to think that wisdom is the accumulation of knowledge, of answers, of certainties. We feel uncomfortable and anxious in the face of the unknown. But the master shows that this don't know mind is not a state of ignorance. It is a state of profound openness and freedom. When we are willing to let go of our need to know, we can meet each moment with a fresh, curious, and undefended heart. The story is a gentle invitation to relax our own certainties, to soften our grip on our opinions and beliefs, and to discover the great peace that can be found in the simple, humble, and courageous state of not knowing. This same humble state is what allows us to see the world not as a problem to be fixed, but as a reality to be met with a kind heart. This brings us to a story about a man who believed his sensitivity was a curse until he learned to see it as a gift. This is the tale of the man with the tender feet. There was a man who had such tender feet that every small stone and every rough patch on the road caused him great pain. He spent his life in a state of constant complaint and misery. He tried to get the villagers to sweep the roads for him. He tried to build special smooth paths, but the world was always too rough for him. One day, a wise old woman saw him limping and complaining. "Your problem is not the road," she said. "Your problem is your feet." She then took 2 pieces of soft leather, and with a needle and thread, she fashioned them into a simple pair of shoes. She gave them to the man. "Here," she said, "try these." The man put on the shoes. He took a tentative step, and then another. A look of pure astonishment came over his face. He could walk on the rocky, uneven ground without any pain at all. He had been trying to change the entire world to fit his own sensitivity. The old woman had taught him that it was much wiser and much more effective to simply protect his own feet. This simple parable is the essence of the spiritual path. We are all in some way the man with the tender feet. We find the world to be a difficult, painful place. We complain about other people, about our circumstances, about the unfairness of life. We are always trying to change the world so that it will not hurt us. The woman's wisdom is to show that the real work is not to change the road, but to change how we walk on the road. The shoes are our own inner resources, our mindfulness, our compassion, our equanimity. When we cultivate these qualities, we are not trying to make the world a less difficult place. We are developing the inner strength and softness to be able to walk on any path with a sense of grace and peace. This same grace is often found not in what we can achieve, but in what we are willing to receive. This brings us to a quiet story of a monk who was a master of discipline, but a novice in the art of acceptance. This is the tale of the monk and the gift of rain. A monk named Jiro was the head of a small, struggling temple in a land that was suffering from a terrible drought. The temple's well was nearly dry, and their small vegetable garden was withered and dying. Jiro was a man of great faith and discipline. Every morning he would perform a long and elaborate ceremony, chanting sutras and making offerings, praying for rain. He was trying, through the force of his own spiritual effort, to make the rain come, but the sky remained clear and blue. One afternoon, a wandering half-mad poet, who was known for his love of wine and his simple, direct wisdom, came to the temple. He saw the parched garden and the anxious monk. He simply sat down in the middle of the dead garden, and he did nothing. He did not pray, he did not chant, he just sat. He sat for 3 days. On the 3rd day, the anxious monk came to him. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "I am performing all the sacred rituals, and you just sit here. You are useless." The poet looked up at the monk, and his eyes were as calm as a deep, still pool. "You are shouting at the sky," he said. "You are trying to command the rain, but the rain cannot be commanded. It can only be received. I am not trying to make the rain come. I am just trying to make my own heart as empty and as thirsty as this dry earth. I am becoming the prayer, not just saying it." At that moment, a single dark cloud appeared in the vast blue sky, and a few drops of rain began to fall. This story is a deep teaching on the nature of prayer and intention. We are often like the monk, believing that we can, through our own effort and will, force the outcomes we desire. Our prayers can become a kind of spiritual demanding. The poet's wisdom is one of deep surrender and receptivity. He understood that the way to invite the rain is not to shout at the sky, but to become one with the thirst of the earth. It is to create a space of deep, humble, and receptive emptiness into which the grace of the universe can flow. This is a profound lesson for our own lives. When we are facing a great difficulty, our instinct is to struggle, to strive, to do more. But what if the wisest action is to simply stop and to create a space of quiet, receptive stillness within ourselves? This stillness is the source of all true art, as our next story reveals. It is a tale of a painter who learned that his greatest skill was not in his hand, but in his mind. This is the story of the painter who painted nothing. The emperor commissioned the 2 greatest painters in the land to a contest. They were each given a wall in a great hall, separated by a curtain. The first painter worked feverishly for a month, creating a masterpiece of incredible detail and vibrant colour. The second painter did not paint at all. He simply spent the month polishing his wall until it shone like a perfect mirror. When the time for the judgment came, the emperor was amazed by the first painter's magnificent mural. Then the curtain was drawn back. The second painter's wall was completely empty, but it perfectly reflected the first painter's masterpiece. The emperor, however, was not impressed. "This is just a trick," he said. "You have created nothing." At that moment, a single small bird flew in through an open window. It saw the beautiful, realistic landscape painted on the first wall, and it flew directly into the wall, thinking it was real, and it fell to the floor, stunned. A moment later, it recovered, and it saw the perfect reflection of itself in the second painter's mirror-like wall, and it began to sing to its own reflection, a song of pure, joyful recognition. The Zen master, who was with the emperor, then spoke. "The first painting," he said, "is a beautiful lie, so beautiful it can fool a bird. The second wall is the simple truth. It adds nothing to the world, but it allows the world to see itself perfectly. Which one is the greater art?" This story is a subtle but profound Zen teaching on the nature of the mind. The first painter represents the mind that is full of beautiful concepts, ideas, and stories, the created world of our thoughts. This can be very alluring, but it is in a sense a beautiful illusion. The second painter represents the mind that has been polished through meditation to a state of pure, clear, and non-judgmental awareness. This mind does not create anything. It simply reflects reality exactly as it is. The story teaches that the goal of spiritual practice is not to fill our minds with more beautiful thoughts, but to polish the mirror of our own consciousness so that we can see the world and ourselves with a perfect and a loving clarity. This same loving clarity is what allows us to see the purpose hidden in our own struggles. This brings us to a quiet tale of a creature that found its wings only after its world had ended. This is the story of the caterpillar's end of the world. A small caterpillar was living a happy life on a green leaf. It ate, it crawled, it enjoyed the sun, but one day it felt a strange and powerful inner urge. It began to weave a small silken house around itself. Its world grew dark and confined. "This is the end," it thought in a panic. "I am making my own tomb." It felt a great and terrible transformation begin, a dissolving of its very being. It was a time of complete darkness, of struggle and of utter surrender. And then one day, a light broke through. It pushed its way out of the small, confining house, and it found itself hanging in the bright, warm air, and it felt something new and magnificent on its back. It stretched, and it unfurled two vast, beautiful, and brilliantly coloured wings. It was no longer a caterpillar, confined to a single leaf. It was a butterfly, and the entire sky was now its home. And it realized that what it had thought was the end of the world was actually the beginning of a whole new and more beautiful one. This story is a timeless metaphor for the process of spiritual transformation. We are often like the caterpillar, comfortable in our familiar world, in our familiar identity. And when the call to change comes, when we are drawn into a period of inner work, of letting go, of the dark night of the soul, it can feel like a death. We are terrified of losing the self that we know, but the story promises that this dissolving is not an end, but a metamorphosis. It is the necessary process of letting go of our limited, crawling self, so that our winged, boundless self can be born. The story is a message of profound hope for anyone who is in a period of difficulty or confusion. It is a reminder to trust the process, to surrender to the transformation, and to know that what feels like an ending may just be the sacred and necessary prelude to a new and more beautiful beginning. This new beginning is often found not by changing our world, but by changing our mind about it. This brings us to a simple tale of a monk who learned that freedom is not a place, but a perspective. This is the story of the monk in the crowded marketplace. A young monk had spent 10 years in a silent, secluded mountain monastery. He had achieved a deep and profound state of peace. He came to his master. "I am ready," he said. "I have found the unshakable stillness." "Good," the master said. "Now your final training will begin. You must go and live for 1 year in a small room right in the middle of the city's busiest and noisiest marketplace." The monk was horrified, but he obeyed. The first few months were a kind of hell. The noise was constant, the smells were overwhelming, and the chaotic energy of the crowd shattered his fragile peace. He was miserable and longed for the silence of his mountain, but he had no choice, so he simply sat with his experience. He stopped fighting the noise. He just let it be, and a strange thing happened. He began to hear the noise differently. He heard the shouting of the merchants not as an intrusion, but as a kind of raw, vibrant energy. He heard the crying of a child, and he felt a pang of compassion. He heard the laughter of two friends, and he felt a touch of joy. He began to see that the entire messy, chaotic marketplace was a perfect expression of the human heart, with all its suffering and all its beauty. The noise had not changed, but he had. When he returned to the monastery, the master asked him, "Did you find peace?" The monk replied, "No, master. I did not find peace. I discovered that the peace was never lost. It was just waiting patiently, right in the middle of all the noise." This story is a powerful teaching on the nature of true equanimity. We are often like the young monk, believing that our peace is a delicate thing that depends on having perfect, quiet, external conditions. We are always trying to get away from the marketplace of our lives. But the Master's wisdom is that a peace that can be destroyed by a little noise is not real peace. True, unshakable peace is not found by escaping from the world, but by learning to find the stillness within the world. It is the discovery that our own awareness is like a deep, silent ocean, and the noises of the world are just waves on the surface. They can be wild and chaotic, but they cannot touch the deep, quiet stillness that is our true home. This same quiet home is a place we can always return to, a truth we discover in a story about a man who searched the world for a teacher, only to find him in his own reflection. This is the tale of the man who searched for a master. A man spent his entire life searching for a truly enlightened master. He travelled to distant lands. He studied with famous gurus. He read all the holy books, but he was always left with a feeling of disappointment. No one seemed to have the final perfect answer he was looking for. Old and weary, he was returning to his home village, his quest a failure. He was walking by a still, clear lake. He was thirsty, so he knelt down to drink, and as he looked at his own reflection in the water, he saw the face he had been searching for his entire life. He saw the lines of his own long journey, the sorrow in his own eyes, the wisdom that had been born from his own suffering. He saw that the face looking back at him was the face of a man who had never given up, who had always been seeking. And in that moment of profound self-acceptance, he bowed to his own reflection. He had finally found his master. This story is a gentle and profound teaching on the nature of the spiritual path. We often look for wisdom and authority outside of ourselves. We put our faith in teachers, in systems, in books, believing that they hold the key to our own liberation. And these things can be wonderful guides. But the story reminds us that the ultimate teacher is our own life, and the ultimate master is the deep, wise, and compassionate awareness that is already present within us. The man's long journey was not a waste. It was the journey that carved the lines of wisdom on his own face. The spiritual path is not about becoming someone else. It is the process of becoming fully and compassionately ourselves. The story is a loving invitation to stop searching outside and to turn our attention inward, and to have the courage to bow to the profound wisdom that is already looking back at us from our own eyes. This wisdom is often found not in what we do, but in the quality of the heart we bring to our actions. This brings us to a quiet story of a woman who taught a whole village with a single simple act. This is the tale of the woman and the simple bowl of rice. In a village that was suffering from a terrible famine, there lived an old woman who had only a tiny handful of rice left. It was enough for one small meal, and then she would surely starve. As she was cooking this last meal, a hungry, emaciated monk came to her door, his begging bowl empty. Without a moment's hesitation, the old woman took her own last portion of rice and placed it in the monk's bowl. The monk, who was the great bodhisattva of compassion in disguise, bowed and asked her, "You have given me your last food. Do you not feel any regret?" The old woman smiled, a peaceful, toothless smile. "No, venerable sir," she said. "My only regret is that I did not have more to give." At that moment, her own empty cooking pot magically filled to the brim with the most fragrant and delicious rice, enough to feed the entire village. And it was said that from that day on, her pot was never empty again. This story is a simple but powerful teaching on the nature of true generosity. It is what Buddhism calls dana, or selfless giving. The woman's act was a perfect expression of this. Her giving was not a transaction. It was a complete and total offering of the heart, with no thought of herself. The miracle of the endlessly refilling pot is a metaphor for a deep spiritual truth, what we give away from a pure heart is never truly lost. In fact, the very act of selfless giving connects us to the boundless abundance of the universe. The story teaches us that true wealth is not in what we have, but in what we can give away. It is not our possessions, but the quality of our compassion that is the source of our true and lasting abundance. This same abundance of the heart is the theme of our next story for this journey. It is a tale of a master who gave his greatest teaching, not in a sermon, but in a simple human gesture. This is the story of the master and the cold night. The Zen master was meditating in his hut on a bitterly cold winter night. A thief, shivering and desperate, broke in, looking for something to steal to buy food. He found nothing. The master opened his eyes and saw the poor, freezing man. He felt not anger, but a deep and immediate compassion. The master took off the one, simple, thin blanket from his own sleeping mat. "Here," he said, and he wrapped the blanket around the thief's shoulders. "Please take this. The night is very cold." The thief, who had only ever known cruelty and suspicion, was so stunned by this act of unconditional kindness that he could not speak. He just stood there, wrapped in the master's warmth, and then he turned and fled into the night. The master sat back down on his mat, now with nothing to cover him from the cold. He looked out the open door at the brilliant, cold stars, and he thought to himself, "I wish I could have given him the whole beautiful starry sky." This quiet story brings us to the very heart of the enlightened mind. It is a mind that is so empty of self, so free from attachment, that its natural, spontaneous response to the world is one of boundless and unconditional love. The master's final thought is the purest expression of compassion. He has just given away his only protection from the cold, and his only regret is that he did not have something even vaster and more beautiful to give. It is a reminder that the peace we cultivate through our practice is not just for ourselves. It is a warmth that we can offer to a cold and suffering world, a quiet light that we can share in the darkness. That profound, selfless wish to give away the entire starry sky reveals a heart that has discovered its own boundless nature. This same discovery is often made not in moments of greatness, but in our acceptance of our own simple, ordinary humanity. This brings us to a story about a monk who learned that true spirituality is not about rising above our nature, but about becoming fully intimate with it. This is the tale of the monk who was afraid of spiders. A monk named Renzo was a man of great discipline and learning. He could sit in meditation for hours without moving, and he could debate the most complex points of philosophy, but he had one secret shame. He was terrified of spiders. The smallest spider would send him into a state of panic. He saw this fear as a terrible spiritual failing, a sign of his own impurity. He fought against it. He meditated on it. He performed rituals to purify himself of it, but the fear remained. One day, the abbot of the monastery, a wise old master, gave Renzo a new task. "I want you to become the guardian of the spiders," he said. "Your only job will be to ensure that no one in this monastery harms a single spider." Renzo was horrified. It was the worst possible task he could imagine, but he had to obey. For months his life was a living nightmare. He would have to gently catch spiders in his hands, to move them out of the path of a broom. He would have to stand guard over webs, to make sure no one disturbed them. He was in a state of constant low-grade terror, but slowly a strange thing happened. Because he had to look so closely at the spiders every day, he began to see them differently. He saw the incredible, intricate beauty of their webs. He saw the patient, still way they waited. He saw their vulnerability. He stopped seeing them as terrifying monsters, and he began to see them simply as fellow living beings, each trying to survive in its own way. His fear did not vanish overnight, but it slowly transformed into a kind of gentle, respectful awe. He had not conquered his fear. He had simply gotten to know it so well that it had become a familiar and no longer terrifying part of the landscape of his mind. This story is a deep teaching on the Zen practice of turning toward our difficulties. We are often like Renzo, believing that our fears, our anxieties, and our flaws are enemies to be defeated or purified. We fight against them, which only gives them more energy. The abbot's brilliant instruction was a form of compassionate exposure. By making Renzo the guardian of his fear, he forced him to become intimate with it. The life-changing insight is that our fears are often created and sustained by our own stories about them, not by the things themselves. When we can let go of the story and meet the raw, direct experience with a gentle and curious attention, the fear begins to lose its power. It is not about becoming fearless. It is about becoming more intimate with our fear so that it no longer controls us. This same intimacy with our own experience is the key to all true art, as our next story reveals. It is a tale of a musician who learned that his greatest instrument was not the one he held in his hands. This is the story of the flute player and the mountain. There was a flute player who was a technical genius. He could play faster and more flawlessly than anyone in the land. He decided he would compose a piece of music that would perfectly capture the spirit of the great mountain that stood behind his village. For a year he studied the mountain. He measured its height. He noted its geological formations. He painted pictures of it. He then composed a piece of music that was a brilliant technical masterpiece. It had passages that soared like the high peaks and rumbled like a rock slide. He had perfectly translated the idea of the mountain into music. He played his composition for a Zen master who lived at the foot of the mountain. When he was finished, the master was silent for a long time. "It is very clever," the master finally said. "It sounds exactly like a man who has thought a great deal about a mountain, but it does not sound like the mountain." The musician was crushed. "Then what must I do?" he asked. "You must forget that you are a musician," the master said. "And you must forget that this is a mountain. Go and sit on the mountain for a month. Do not take your flute. Just be there. Let the mountain play you." The musician did as he was told. He sat on the mountain for a month. He felt the wind that had been blowing for 1,000 years. He felt the deep, slow, and patient silence of the ancient rock. He felt the vast, open sky above him. The mountain began to seep into his bones. When he returned, he did not compose a piece of music. He simply picked up his flute, and the mountain began to sing through him. The music was simple, quiet, and full of a deep, ancient power. It did not sound like the mountain. It was the mountain. This story is a profound teaching on the source of all true creativity and wisdom. The musician's first attempt was a creation of the ego, the clever, analytical mind. It was a beautiful description, but it was not the real thing. The master's instruction was to move from the mind to the being, from doing to receiving. It is a lesson in deep listening. The true artist, the true sage, does not impose their own ideas on the world. They become a quiet, empty channel through which the spirit of the world can express itself. This is a practice for all of us. Whether we are trying to solve a problem at work, or navigate a difficult relationship, or simply find peace in our own hearts, the practice is the same. Can we stop trying to impose our own clever solutions and instead become quiet enough to listen to the deep, silent wisdom that is already present in the situation itself? This deep, silent wisdom is often found not in our strength, but in our willingness to be empty. This brings us to a quiet story about a student who was given a task that could not be completed, and the profound lesson it contained. This is the tale of the monk and the empty well. A young, strong, and very eager monk came to a monastery. He was determined to prove his worth through hard work. The master, seeing his ambition, gave him a task. "Our well has gone dry," the master said. "Your task is to fill it." The monk was thrilled. He took 2 large buckets and began to carry water from a distant river. He worked from before sunrise to after sunset, his strong body pouring with sweat. He poured hundreds and hundreds of buckets of water into the deep, dark well. But the well was old and had deep cracks in its stone lining. The water simply seeped away into the thirsty earth as fast as he could pour it in. He worked for a week, growing more and more exhausted and frustrated. The well remained empty. Finally he went to the master, his body aching, his spirit broken. "Master, I have failed," he said. "The well cannot be filled. It is a useless, broken thing." "No," the master said gently. "The well is not useless, and you have not failed. You have just been trying to do the wrong thing. You have been trying to fill an emptiness that is meant to be empty. A well's true purpose is not to hold water, but to be a deep and open channel through which the hidden underground springs can rise up to meet the sky. Your task was never to fill the well from the outside. It was to become quiet enough to discover the living water that was already hidden in its own depths. This story is a beautiful metaphor for our own inner lives. We often feel an inner emptiness, a sense of lack, and we spend our lives trying to fill it from the outside, with achievements, with relationships, with experiences, with possessions. We are like the monk, trying to fill a leaky well. It is an exhausting and endless task. The Master's wisdom is a life-changing shift in perspective. The emptiness within us is not a flaw to be fixed. It is our true nature. It is the vast, open and receptive space of our own consciousness. The spiritual path is not about filling this space. It is about becoming still enough to allow the living water, the innate wisdom and peace that is already present in our own depths, to well up and fill our lives from within. This inner wellspring is the source of all true security, a lesson we learned from a man who believed his safety was in his walls, not in his heart. This is the tale of the merchant and the open gate. A very wealthy merchant lived in a magnificent house surrounded by high, thick walls. He had a great, heavy gate made of iron, and at night he would lock it with 3 enormous bolts. He believed his great wealth was safe because his walls were strong and his gate was locked, but he did not sleep well. He was in a constant state of fear, always listening for the sound of thieves. A Zen master lived next door in a simple, flimsy hut made of bamboo, with only a thin paper screen for a door. The master slept soundly every single night. The merchant was baffled by this. He went to the master. "How can you sleep so soundly?" he asked. "You have no walls, no gate. You are completely unprotected. Are you not afraid of thieves?" The master smiled. "You have one great strong gate that you lock every night," he said, "and because of that you believe that everyone on the outside is a potential thief. You live in a prison of your own making. I, on the other hand, have 100 small, open gates. My gate is my own open and trusting heart. A thief might come and take my bowl or my robe, for those are just things, but no one can ever steal my peace, because I do not keep it locked away. I give it freely to everyone I meet. Now tell me, which of us is truly safer?" From this story is a profound teaching on the nature of true security. We are often like the merchant, believing that our safety comes from building walls, from protecting ourselves, from being guarded and suspicious. But the story shows that these very walls are what create our fear. When we live behind a locked gate, the whole world becomes a threat. The Master's wisdom is to find security not in outer walls, but in an inner openness. His 100 small, open gates are a state of mind that is not afraid, not grasping, and not defensive. This does not mean being foolish or naive. It is the deep spiritual confidence that our true treasure, our own inner peace, our capacity for love, is not a thing that can be stolen. It is a wellspring that is always available. The story gently asks us to look at the walls we have built around our own hearts. Are they truly keeping us safe, or are they just imprisoning us in our own fear? This same freedom is found not by avoiding life's difficulties, but by learning to see them with new eyes. This brings us to a quiet story about a monk who was given a single, seemingly negative word and the positive truth he found within it. This is the tale of the monk and the word no. A young monk was deeply attached to the idea of his own spiritual progress. He would constantly go to his master, seeking praise and validation. "Master," he would say, "I have meditated for 5 hours today. Is that good?" And the master would simply reply, "No." The monk would be crestfallen, but he would try harder. "Master, I have finally understood the great teaching on emptiness. Is my understanding correct?" And the master would just say, "No." This went on for years. The monk would achieve great states of concentration. He would perform acts of great compassion. He would write beautiful poems about the Dharma, and to every single one of his achievements, the master's only response was a simple, quiet, and unwavering no. The monk was driven to the point of despair. He had done everything he could, and he was still a failure. One day he came to the master. his heart completely empty of all pride and all seeking. He simply bowed, and he said nothing. He had no more achievements to report, no more understandings to display. The master looked at him, and for the first time, a gentle, compassionate smile spread across his face. "Yes," he said. In that one simple word, the monk was awakened. He realized that the master's no had not been a rejection of him, but a rejection of his ego, of his constant need for validation. The no was a compassionate sword, cutting away every branch of his spiritual pride. It was only when he finally came with a heart that was truly empty, with nothing to offer, that he could receive the simple, affirming yes of his own true nature. This story is a deep teaching on the Zen practice of letting go of the good. We are often as attached to our spiritual successes as we are to our worldly ones. We build an identity as a good meditator or a compassionate person, and this identity becomes another subtle prison for the ego. The master's relentless no was a radical form of purification. He was teaching the student to act not for a reward, not for praise, and not even for the good feeling of accomplishment, but to act simply for the sake of the action itself. The final yes was the recognition that the student had finally arrived at a place of true selfless practice. This selfless heart is what allows us to see the world not as a collection of separate beings, but as a single interconnected family. This brings us to a simple tale of a woman who learned the most important lesson, not in a temple, but in her own kitchen. This is the story of the old woman and the hungry ghost. An old woman who was a devout Buddhist would always leave out a small offering of food each evening for the hungry ghosts, the restless spirits who it was believed were tormented by an insatiable hunger. Her neighbor, a cynical man, would laugh at her. "You are a fool," he would say. "There are no such things as hungry ghosts. You are just wasting good food." One night, a real hungry ghost, a truly tormented spirit with a tiny needle-thin throat that made it impossible for him to swallow, appeared before the old woman as she was making her offering. "Old woman," he rasped, his voice full of a desperate and ancient sorrow, "your offerings are useless. My throat is too small. I can never eat. My suffering is endless." The old woman looked at this tormented being, not with fear, but with a deep and simple compassion. She did not offer him food. Instead, she sat down beside him. "Then I will not eat either," she said. "I will just sit here with you, and I will be hungry with you." And in that one simple act of shared solidarity, in that one moment of pure, unconditional empathy, a miracle occurred. The hungry ghost felt his ancient, burning hunger begin to subside. Her willingness to share his suffering without trying to fix it was the first food that had ever truly touched his heart. This story is a profound teaching on the nature of true compassion. We are often like the cynical neighbor, believing only in what we can see and dismissing the unseen suffering of the world. Or when we do see suffering, we believe the solution is to offer a simple material fix. But the old woman's wisdom is deeper. She understood that the deepest hunger is the hunger to be seen, to be heard, and to not be alone in our pain. Her greatest offering was not the food, it was her presence. She was willing to sit in the darkness with another without needing to turn on the light. This is a life-changing lesson for how we can be with our own hungry ghosts, our own deepest pains and fears, and how we can be with others. Sometimes the most healing thing we can do is to stop trying to fix the problem and to simply say, in our hearts, "I will be here with you. You are not alone." This simple presence is the key that can unlock the door of even the hardest heart, as our next story shows. It is a tale of a warrior who believed his strength was in his armor and the child who taught him otherwise. This is the story of the samurai's armor. There was a great samurai who was the captain of the emperor's guard. He was a man who lived his entire life inside a suit of heavy black armor. He wore it in the palace. He wore it on the road, and it was said he even slept in it. The armor was his identity. It made him feel strong, powerful, and invulnerable. But it also made him feel heavy, stiff, and completely cut off from the world. He could not feel the warmth of the sun or the gentle touch of the wind. One day he was standing guard in the palace courtyard, motionless as a statue. A small child, the emperor's youngest daughter, came up to him. She was not intimidated by his fierce appearance. She looked at him with clear, curious eyes. She reached out her small hand and she touched the cold, hard iron of his breastplate. "It must be so lonely in there," she said. Her simple, innocent words pierced the samurai's heart in a way that no sword ever could. He had spent his life cultivating an image of invulnerable strength, but this small child had seen the truth. She had seen the lonely man hiding inside the iron shell. That night, for the first time in 20 years, the samurai took off his armor. He felt the cool night air on his skin. He looked up at the stars, and he wept, not with sadness, but with the profound relief of finally being free. This story is a powerful metaphor for the emotional and psychological armor that we all wear. We build it to protect ourselves from being hurt. The armor of cynicism, of indifference, of intellectualism, of being strong and never showing vulnerability. This armor can make us feel safe, but as the story shows, it also cuts us off from the warmth, the beauty, and the simple human connection of life. The child represents the power of pure, innocent, and heartfelt perception. She did not see a great warrior. She saw a lonely human being. Her simple act of empathy was the key that unlocked his prison. The story is a gentle invitation to look at our own armor. What are the defenses that we use to keep the world at bay? And what would it feel like, just for a moment, to have the courage to take them off and to let the world in? This same courage is what allows us to find our path, not by looking for a map, but by learning to read the landscape of our own heart. This brings us to a quiet story of a student who was given a single, seemingly simple object and the profound journey it inspired. This is the tale of the master's compass. A young student was about to set out on a long and difficult pilgrimage. He went to his master to ask for a final teaching to guide him. "Master," he said, "the world is a vast and confusing place. I am afraid I will lose my way. Please, give me a map, a set of rules, something that will tell me which way to go." The master did not give him a map. Instead, he handed him a small, simple, and beautifully crafted compass. But it was a strange compass. It had no markings for north, south, east, or west. It had only a single, slender, silver needle which spun freely. "This is all you will need," the master said. The student was confused, but he took the compass on his journey. Whenever he came to a crossroads and did not know which way to turn, he would take out the compass. He would hold it, and he would quiet his mind. He saw that the needle did not point to a fixed direction in the world out there. Instead, he noticed that when he thought of a path that was born of fear or greed, the needle would tremble and spin erratically. But when he contemplated a path that felt true, that felt aligned with a sense of kindness and an open heart, the needle would become calm, steady, and still. He learned that the compass was not pointing to a direction on the earth. It was pointing to the quality of his own heart. It was his own inner compass, and by learning to read it, he never lost his way. This story is a deep teaching on the nature of inner guidance. We often wish for an external map, a clear set of rules that will tell us how to live our lives. We want certainty, but the master knows that such a map would be a prison. Life is too complex and too fluid to be navigated by a fixed set of rules. The compass is a metaphor for our own innate intuitive wisdom, our own inner sense of what is true and right. The practice is to learn to quiet the noisy, demanding voices of our ego, our fear and our ambition, so that we can hear the subtle, quiet guidance of our own heart. The story reminds us that we all have this inner compass. The true path is not about following someone else's map. It is about learning to trust the quiet, steady needle of our own deepest truth. This deep truth is often found not in what we can achieve, but in what we can see. This brings us to a tale about a man who believed his value was in his skill, until he learned the greater value of simple perception. This is the story of the man who carved the cherry blossoms. There was a master woodcarver who was famous for his ability to carve incredibly lifelike cherry blossoms from simple blocks of wood. His skill was so great that people said you could almost smell their fragrance. He was very proud of his ability to create such perfect, lasting beauty. One day, a Zen master came to visit his workshop. The carver, wanting to impress him, showed him his most perfect creation, a single, flawless, wooden cherry blossom, perfect in every detail. "Is it not a masterpiece, master?" he asked. "It will never wilt or fade. It is a beauty that will last forever." The master took the wooden blossom and held it. "It is a work of incredible skill," he said. "It shows the perfection of your hand, but now come with me." He led the carver outside to a real cherry tree that was in full glorious bloom. A gentle breeze was blowing, and a soft shower of real pink and white petals was drifting down to the ground. "This," the master said softly, "is the perfection of the heart. It is beautiful, not because it lasts forever, but precisely because it does not. Its beauty is in its fragility, in its willingness to let go. Your blossom is a memory of beauty. This is beauty itself, alive and dancing in this one, unrepeatable moment." This story is a classic Zen teaching on the difference between the created, static perfection of the ego and the living, fluid and impermanent beauty of reality. The carver, for all his skill, was trying to freeze life, to capture it and make it permanent. This is a deep human desire, but it is a desire that is at odds with the nature of reality. The master's wisdom is to point to a different kind of beauty, a beauty that is found in the full, loving and appreciative acceptance of the transient nature of life. The story is a gentle invitation to let go of our need for things to be permanent, and to find the profound and poignant beauty that is present in every fleeting moment, in the taste of a cup of tea, in the sound of a loved one's laugh, in the dance of a falling petal. This same gentle acceptance is the theme of our next story. It is a tale that brings us back to the most simple and fundamental practice of all, the art of returning. This is the story of the monk and the path back home. A young monk was practicing walking meditation in the monastery garden. He was trying very hard to be perfectly mindful of his every step, but his mind was restless. A thought would arise about his chores, and he would follow it. A memory would come, and he would get lost in it. A worry about the future would appear, and he would be carried away by it. He felt like a failure. "I am a terrible meditator," he thought. "I take one mindful step, and then my mind wanders for 100 steps. I am always lost." He was about to give up in despair when he saw the old Zen abbot walking in the garden. The abbot was not walking in a special formal way. He was just walking, but there was a deep and easy peace in his every movement. The young monk went to him. "Master," he said, "how do you do it? How do you stay so present? My mind is always wandering. I am always lost." The old abbot smiled a kind and gentle smile. "Oh," he said, "my mind wanders too. It wanders all the time." The young monk was shocked. "It does? Of course," the abbot replied. "That is the nature of the mind. It is a wonderful wanderer. But the practice of meditation is not about stopping the mind from wandering. That is impossible. The practice is about what you do in the moment you realize you have wandered. The practice is not the one perfect step. The practice is the one gentle, kind and non-judgmental step that you take to come back again and again and again. The art of meditation is not the art of staying. It is the art of returning. This quiet story is perhaps the most compassionate and life-changing teaching of all for anyone who has ever struggled with meditation or with a restless mind. We often have the idea that the goal is to achieve a state of perfect, unbroken concentration. And when our minds wander, which they inevitably do, we feel that we have failed. This creates a cycle of striving and self-judgment. The abbot's wisdom is a profound relief. The wandering is not a mistake. It is a part of the process. Every time you notice that your mind has wandered, that is a moment of pure, clear mindfulness. That is a moment of success. And the act of gently, kindly, and without any self-criticism, guiding your attention back to your breath or to your footsteps, that is the very heart of the practice. It is in this endless, patient and loving act of returning that our minds are truly trained and our hearts are truly healed. That gentle, compassionate act of returning to the present moment, again and again, is the very essence of the path. This same heart of acceptance is what allows us to see our own lives not as a problem to be solved, but as a journey to be lived. This brings us to a quiet story about a man who believed happiness was a destination, and the simple truth he learned about the road. This is the tale of the man who searched for the perfect road. A man was convinced that if he could just find the perfect road, his life would be filled with peace and happiness. He believed this road would be smooth, straight, and free of all obstacles. He traveled the world in search of it. He walked on roads of dusty earth, of sharp gravel, and of polished stone. He journeyed through sun-drenched valleys and shadowy forests. But every road he found had some flaw. One was too steep, another too muddy, another too crowded. Old and weary, his quest a failure, he came to a small, simple monastery. He told the old abbot of his lifelong search. "I have searched the whole world," he said sadly, "but the perfect road does not exist." The abbot smiled. "You have been looking for the wrong thing," he said. "The purpose of a road is not to be perfect. Its purpose is to take you where you need to go, and the only way to have a perfect journey is not to find a perfect road, but to learn to walk the road you are on with a perfect heart." He then led the man to the monastery's simple, well-worn kitchen path. "For 40 years, the abbot said, my only road has been these 20 steps from the hall to the well, but on this small path I have found everything. I have found the stillness of the morning, the warmth of the sun, the coolness of the rain. The road is not the journey, your own heart is the journey." This story is a simple but profound teaching on the nature of contentment. We are often like the man, believing that our happiness depends on finding the perfect external conditions, the perfect job, the perfect partner, the perfect life. We are always searching for a smoother road, but the abbot's wisdom is a life-changing shift in perspective. It is the realization that peace is not found in the quality of our path, but in the quality of our presence as we walk it. The spiritual life is not about getting somewhere else. It is about learning to be fully here on the imperfect, ordinary, and beautiful road of our own life. The ability to be fully here in our own skin is often the greatest challenge. This brings us to a tale about a creature that spent its life trying to be something else, and the quiet lesson that brought it home to itself. This is the story of the crab and the crane. A small crab lived in a muddy riverbank. He spent his days watching a magnificent white crane that would stand in the shallows. The crane was elegant, graceful, and could fly into the vast blue sky. The crab hated his own life. He hated his clumsy sideways walk, his hard, heavy shell, and the dark, muddy world he lived in. "If only I could be like the crane," he would sigh. One day, a Zen master was sitting by the riverbank, and he heard the crab's lament. He leaned down and spoke to the crab. "You wish to be like the crane?" he asked. "The crane's long legs are beautiful, but they are also brittle and can be easily broken in a storm. His white feathers are elegant, but they offer no protection from a hawk. His ability to fly is a great freedom, but he can never know the secret, quiet world that lies at the bottom of this river. Your shell is heavy, but it is a fortress that keeps you safe. Your sideways walk is strange, but it allows you to navigate the narrow spaces between the rocks where the sweetest morsels are found. You have been so busy wanting to be a crane that you have never learned the great and wonderful art of being a crab." This simple story is a powerful teaching on the nature of self-acceptance and the poison of comparison. We are often like the crab, looking at the lives of others and feeling that our own life is lacking. We compare our muddy reality with the elegant appearance of someone else, and we create our own suffering. The Master's wisdom is to gently guide us back to an appreciation of our own unique nature. Every being has its own strengths and its own vulnerabilities. The path to peace is not in trying to become someone else, but in learning to inhabit our own life fully, to appreciate our own unique shell, and to master the simple, humble art of being who we are. This same art of being is often found not in what we can do, but in what we can see. This brings us to a quiet story of a monk who was a master of discipline, but a novice in the world of beauty. This is the tale of the monk and the cherry blossom. A very austere and disciplined monk had spent his life practicing a form of meditation that involved a complete detachment from the world of the senses. He saw beauty as a dangerous distraction, a form of attachment. One spring, he was travelling with his master. They came to a valley that was filled with thousands of cherry trees, all in full, glorious bloom. It was a scene of breathtaking, almost overwhelming beauty. The master stopped, his face filled with a quiet, radiant joy, but the student kept his eyes fixed firmly on the ground in front of him. "Master, we must not linger," he said. "This is just a fleeting illusion, a dangerous attachment for the senses." The master turned to him, a gentle smile on his face. "Yes," he said, "it is a fleeting illusion. In a week, all this beauty will be gone. Is that not the very reason to stop and to receive this one, perfect, unrepeatable gift with a full and a grateful heart?" He then simply stood in silent communion with the blossoms, and the student for the first time understood that true detachment was not about rejecting the beauty of the world, but about loving it so completely that you are willing to let it go. This story is a subtle but life-changing teaching on the nature of non-attachment. We often mistake it for a cold indifference or a rejection of life's joys. The student represents this misunderstanding. But the master's wisdom is to show that true non-attachment is the very thing that allows for the deepest and most joyful appreciation. Because he is not trying to hold on to the blossoms, because he is not afraid of the fact that they will fade, he is completely free to love them, right here, right now, in all their fleeting, poignant beauty. The story is a gentle invitation for us to open our hearts to the beauty of our own fleeting, precious, and unrepeatable lives. This same open heart is what allows us to learn from every corner of our experience. This brings us to a tale of a student who believed wisdom was found only in silence, until he learned the lesson of the marketplace. This is the story of the monk and the noisy children. A young monk had spent years in a silent mountain monastery, and he had achieved a state of deep, pristine calm. He came to his master and said, "I have found the great silence. My mind is at peace." The master said, "Your training is not yet complete. You must go and live for 1 month as a caretaker in a small temple in the middle of a poor and crowded village." The monk was horrified. The village temple was right next to a schoolyard, and all day from sunrise to sunset, it was filled with the noise of children shouting, laughing, and crying. The monk's first week was a torment. His beautiful, pristine silence was shattered. He was filled with anger and resentment, but he had no choice but to stay. He stopped trying to block out the noise, and he just let it be. And as he listened, he began to hear the sounds differently. He heard in the shouting not just noise, but the raw, vibrant energy of life. He heard in the laughter a sound of pure, uncomplicated joy, and he heard in the crying a sound of simple, honest sadness. He began to feel a deep and unexpected connection to these children, to their simple, direct, and uncensored humanity. At the end of the month, he returned to the monastery. "Master," he said, "I went to your village to teach them about silence, but instead, the children have taught me about life." This story is a beautiful teaching on the difference between a conditional peace and a robust peace. The monk's initial peace was a fragile thing that depended on perfect silent conditions. It was a greenhouse flower. The noisy children represent the messy, unpredictable, and often chaotic reality of the world. The master knew that true wisdom must be able to survive and even thrive in the midst of this reality. The monk's great insight was to stop seeing the children as a distraction from his practice and to start seeing them as his practice. This is a life-changing shift for all of us. We often see the difficult and noisy parts of our lives as obstacles to our peace. But what if they are the very things that are here to teach us, to soften our hearts, and to make our peace a real, resilient, and compassionate thing? This same compassionate heart is what allows us to see the world not as a collection of problems, but as a place that is calling for our care. This brings us to a quiet story of a master who gave his greatest teaching not by what he built, but by what he mended. This is the tale of the master and the broken fence. A new governor, a man of great ambition and a lover of order, came to a province where a famous Zen master lived. The governor heard that the master was a living national treasure, and he went to visit him, expecting to find a magnificent temple and a great community of monks. Instead, he found the master living alone in a simple, run-down hut. The most shocking thing to the governor was the fence around the master's small garden. It was old and broken, with several slats of wood missing. "Master," the governor exclaimed, "This is a disgrace. You are a great teacher. Your home should be a model of perfection. I will send my own carpenters tomorrow to build you a magnificent new fence." The master smiled and thanked the governor for his kind offer, but he refused. "This fence and I have an agreement," he said. The next morning the governor, curious, spied on the master. He saw the old man come out of his hut. He did not build a new fence. He simply found a single small piece of fallen wood, and with a piece of old twine, he carefully and lovingly mended just one small broken slat. It was a tiny, imperfect repair on a very broken fence. The governor, who was watching, suddenly understood. The master was not trying to create a perfect, finished world. His practice was in the simple, continuous, and loving act of mending, of meeting the brokenness of the world, one small piece at a time, with his own gentle and patient care. This story is a profound teaching on the nature of our work in the world. We are often like the governor, believing that our job is to create a perfect final product, the perfect career, the perfect family, the perfect society. This can be an overwhelming and frustrating task. The master's wisdom is to see that our true path is not in the grand final creation, but in the small, humble, and continuous act of mending. Our world is like the broken fence. It will always be in need of care. The story invites us to let go of the need to fix everything and to instead find the deep meaning and peace that comes from simply doing our own small part, from mending the one small piece of the world that is in front of us today with a gentle and a loving heart. This same gentle heart is what allows us to find freedom, not by adding to our lives, but by letting go of what is not essential. This brings us to a story about a man who was a prisoner of his own habits and the simple truth that set him free. This is the tale of the man and the heavy coat. There was a man who owned a magnificent heavy coat made of wool and fur. It had been given to him by his father, and it was a symbol of his family and his history. He was very attached to it, and he wore it everywhere, in all seasons. In the winter the coat was a great comfort, and it kept him warm. But in the spring it became a little heavy, and in the heat of the summer it was an unbearable, suffocating burden. He would sweat and struggle, but he would not take it off. "This coat is who I am," he would say. "I cannot be without it." He was so attached to the comfort and the identity the coat had once given him that he was willing to suffer greatly to hold on to it. One hot summer day, he was walking by a river on the verge of collapsing from heat exhaustion. He saw a Zen master sitting in the cool shade of a willow tree. The master simply looked at the man and said, "My friend, if you are hot, why do you not take off your coat?" The question was so simple, so obvious, that it broke through the man's lifetime of conditioning. He looked at the heavy coat he was wearing, and he looked at the cool, inviting river, and for the first time he realized he had a choice. The coat was not him, it was just a coat. He took it off, and with a great feeling of release, he dove into the cool water. It was the first time he had felt truly free in years. This story is a simple metaphor for our own attachments to our old habits, our old beliefs, and our old identities. These things, like the coat, may have served us well at one time. They may have kept us safe and given us comfort. But we can become so attached to them that we continue to carry them long after they have become a heavy and suffocating burden. The Master's question is the voice of mindfulness. It is the simple, clear-seeing awareness that asks, "Is this truly serving me now?" The story is a gentle invitation to look at the heavy coats in our own lives. What old beliefs, what old stories about ourselves, what old habits are we carrying out of a sense of loyalty or fear, even though they are now causing us to suffer? And what would it feel like to have the courage to simply take them off? This same courage is what allows us to see that true abundance is not in what we have, but in what we share. This brings us to a quiet story of a monk who owned nothing, and was therefore the wealthiest man in the world. This is the tale of the monk and the bowl of cherries. The Zen master Ryokan, who lived a life of great simplicity, was walking one day when he came across a farmer whose cart had broken down. The farmer was in despair, as he had a large basket of the first perfect cherries of the season, and he was afraid he would not get them to the market in time before they spoiled. Ryokan, who was old and not very strong, helped the farmer for several hours to mend the wheel of his cart. When they were finished, the farmer was filled with gratitude. "Master," he said, "I have no money to pay you, but please take this entire basket of cherries as a gift." Ryakan smiled. He reached into the great basket and he took out a single, small, perfect cherry. "Thank you," he said. "You are very kind. This is all I need." He then bowed and continued on his way. His young student, who was with him, was confused. "Master," he said, "that farmer offered us the whole basket. Why did you only take one? We could have eaten cherries for a week." Ryakan looked at the single, perfect cherry resting in his palm. "To have taken the whole basket," he said, "would have been to take on the burden of 100 cherries. I would have had to worry about them spoiling. I would have had to guard them, and I would have had to eat when I was not hungry. But to take one cherry is to receive the entire sweetness of the whole basket and the entire kindness of the farmer's heart, with no burden at all. True wealth is not in how much you can get. It is in how little you need to be perfectly happy." This story is a beautiful teaching on the nature of contentment and simplicity. We are a culture that believes that more is better. We are constantly trying to accumulate more possessions, more experiences, more of everything. We are always trying to get the whole basket. But the Master's wisdom is a radical counterpoint to this. He shows that true richness is found not in accumulation, but in appreciation. By taking only one cherry, he was able to be completely present for its perfect singular sweetness. The story gently asks us to look at our own lives. Where are we accumulating more than we truly need and creating a subtle burden for ourselves in the process? And what would it feel like to discover the profound and simple joy that can be found in a single, perfect and mindfully received moment? This mindful presence is the key to finding our path, even when we feel completely lost. This brings us to a story about a student who was looking for a sign and a master who taught him how to see. This is the tale of the student and the pointing finger. A student came to his master in a state of great confusion. "Master," he said, "I do not know what to do with my life. I need a sign. I need a clear direction. Please show me the way." The master did not speak. He simply raised his own index finger and pointed directly at the student's own heart. The student was bewildered. He looked at the master's finger. "What does it mean?" he asked. "Is this a symbol of the one mind? Is it a teaching on the unity of all things?" He began to create all kinds of complex philosophical interpretations. The master just shook his head and continued to point, his gaze steady and unwavering. Finally, the student stopped thinking. He stopped trying to interpret. He followed the line of the master's finger, and his own gaze was led, for the first time, not to a concept, but to the simple, direct and living reality of his own chest. And as he brought his awareness there, he could feel the quiet, steady and faithful rhythm of his own heartbeat. And in that simple felt sensation, he understood. The master was not pointing to an idea, he was pointing to the student's own inner compass, his own deepest truth, the quiet, steady wisdom that had been beating in his own heart all along. The way was not out there to be found, the way was in here to be listened to. This story is a classic Zen encounter, a direct transmission that bypasses the intellect. We are often like the student, looking for an external sign, for someone else to tell us what to do, to give us the map for our lives. But the Master's silent, pointing finger is a life-changing teaching. It is a constant reminder to return our attention to the one place where true guidance can always be found, the quiet wisdom of our own heart. Our intellect can be confused and the opinions of the world are always changing, but that deep, quiet, intuitive sense of what is true for us is our most reliable guide. The practice is to learn to quiet the noise of our own minds so that we can hear its subtle, steady and loving voice. This loving voice is often what guides us through our darkest moments, a lesson we learn from a man who believed his past was a prison. This brings us to a quiet story of forgiveness and the discovery that the key is always in our own hand. This is the tale of the man who carried the ghost. There was a man who was haunted by a ghost. It was the ghost of a terrible mistake he had made many years ago, a mistake that had hurt another person deeply. The ghost was his constant companion. It would whisper words of shame in his ear as he tried to work. It would sit on his chest at night, making it difficult to breathe. He felt that he was condemned to carry this ghost for the rest of his life. He went to a Zen master. "Master," he said, "I am haunted. How can I get rid of this ghost?" The master said, "This ghost seems very powerful. Tell me, when is it the strongest?" "It is the strongest at night," the man replied, "when I am alone in the dark." "Very well," the master said. "Tonight, when the ghost appears, I want you to do something very specific. I want you to stop fighting it. I want you to turn to it, and with a sincere heart, I want you to say these words: 'Thank you for reminding me. I will try to do better.' And then I want you to bow to it." The man thought the master was insane. Bow to his own tormentor, but he was desperate, so he agreed to try. That night, as he lay in the dark, the familiar heavy feeling of the ghost descended upon him. His heart began to pound, but this time he did not fight. He turned his attention inward, and he spoke the words, "Thank you for reminding me. I will try to do better." And then in his mind, he made a small, humble bow, and a miraculous thing happened. The ghost, which was made of resistance and shame, had nothing to push against. In the face of this strange, gentle acceptance, it simply dissolved, like a shadow in a soft light. The man realized that he had not been haunted by a ghost from the past. He had been haunted by his own refusal to forgive himself. This story is a deep teaching on the nature of guilt and self-forgiveness. We are often like the man, carrying the ghosts of our past mistakes with us. We believe that by punishing ourselves, we are atoning for what we have done, but this self-punishment is a prison that helps no one. The Master's wisdom is a radical act of compassionate alchemy. He teaches the man to transform the poison of his guilt into the medicine of his own resolve. The act of saying, "Thank you for reminding me," is to see the memory not as a source of shame, but as a teacher, a reminder of the kind of person we now aspire to be. And the act of bowing is an act of profound self-acceptance. It is the moment we stop fighting with our own past, and we finally set ourselves free. This same freedom is the theme of our next story. It is a tale that brings us back to the simple, profound, and often missed reality of our own true nature. It is a story about a seeker who learned that the greatest truth is not a thing to be found, but a way of being to be lived. This is the tale of the man who found the Buddha. A man spent his entire life on a great spiritual quest. He was searching for the Buddha. He traveled to the holiest mountains and the most ancient temples. He studied with the most famous masters and read all the sacred texts, but he never found what he was looking for. Old and weary, he was returning to his home village, his quest a failure. As he walked down the dusty road, he saw a simple, old, anonymous monk walking toward him. As they passed each other, the old monk simply smiled at him, a smile of such deep, simple, and unconditional peace that it stopped the man in his tracks. In that one simple human smile, the man saw the end of all seeking. "Master," he cried, turning around, "I have searched the whole world for the Buddha. Please tell me where he is." The old monk stopped, and his smile deepened. "You have been looking too far," he said, his voice quiet and gentle. He did not point to the sky, or to a temple, or to a statue. He simply pointed to the man's own heart. "He is right here," he said. "He has just been waiting very patiently for you to come home." That profound, selfless wish to give away the entire starry sky reveals a heart that has discovered its own boundless nature. But what happens when that boundless nature feels trapped by the small container of our own life? This brings us to a story about a creature who learned that its prison was a matter of perspective. This is the tale of the cricket in the golden cage. An emperor had a small cricket that sang the most beautiful song. The emperor loved the cricket's music so much that he had a magnificent tiny cage built for it, made of pure gold and studded with jewels. He fed the cricket the finest grains and gave it drops of the purest water. "Now you are safe," the emperor would say. "You have everything you could ever want." But the cricket stopped singing. It sat in its beautiful cage, silent and still. The emperor was distressed and brought sages from all over the land to find out what was wrong. They all prescribed different rare foods and tonics, but nothing worked. Finally, a simple Zen monk came to the palace. He looked at the magnificent golden cage and the sad, silent cricket. "Your Majesty," he said, "the cricket is not sick. It is listening." "Listening for what?" the emperor asked. "It is listening for the song of the other crickets in the fields," the monk replied. "A cricket's song is not a performance. It is a conversation. It sings in response to the wind and the moon and the voices of its brothers and sisters. You have given it everything except the one thing it truly needs, the freedom to be a part of the world's great song." The monk then opened the door of the golden cage. The cricket sat for a moment, and then it flew out through an open window back to the fields. And that evening, its beautiful song joined the 1,000 other voices in the twilight, more joyful than ever before. This story is a gentle teaching on the nature of our own happiness. We often build golden cages for ourselves. We seek security, comfort, and a life that is free from risk and uncertainty. But in doing so, we can cut ourselves off from the very things that give our life its meaning and its song, connection, freedom, and our own wild, unpredictable nature. The story reminds us that true well-being is not found in a perfect, controlled environment, but in our ability to participate fully and freely in the great, messy, and beautiful song of life. This very participation requires us to let go of our own limited ideas, a lesson we discover in a tale of a boatman who learned that his greatest skill was not in his strength, but in his surrender. This is the story of the boatman and the fog. A young boatman was renowned for his skill in navigating a treacherous rocky river. He knew every current and every hidden stone. He prided himself on his knowledge and his strength. One morning, an unusually thick, white fog descended upon the river, so thick that he could not see the front of his own boat. He had to ferry an important passenger, and his pride would not let him admit defeat. He set out, his hands clenched tightly on his oars, his mind racing, trying to navigate from memory. He was tense and anxious, fighting against the blindness of the fog. He kept bumping into the riverbanks and getting caught in whirlpools. He was failing. His passenger, who was an old Zen master, had been sitting in complete silence. Finally he spoke, his voice calm and quiet in the disorienting whiteness. "Stop rowing," he said. "The river knows its own way to the sea. Put down your oars and just listen." The boatman, desperate, did as he was told. He stopped fighting. He let go of his need to be in control. He simply sat and he listened. In the deep silence of the fog, he began to hear the subtle language of the river for the first time, the gentle gurgle of a deep channel, the soft lapping sound that signaled a sandbar, the faint echo that spoke of a high rock wall. He was no longer trying to force his own path. He was allowing the river to guide him, and by simply making tiny intuitive adjustments with a single oar, he guided the boat safely through the fog, more skillfully than he ever had with all his strength and knowledge. This story is a profound teaching on the limits of the ego and the wisdom of intuitive awareness. The boatman represents our conscious, striving mind, which believes that the way to navigate life's difficulties, the fogs of uncertainty, is through more effort, more control, and more knowledge. But the master's wisdom is to show that there are times when the most skillful action is to stop rowing, to let go of our desperate need to be in control, and to simply listen to the subtle, intuitive guidance that is always present when our minds are quiet. This quiet, listening heart is what allows us to truly help others. A man who believed his value was in what he could build discovered this truth when he was faced with a simple human need. This is the story of the carpenter and the grieving man. A master carpenter, a man who could build magnificent houses and intricate furniture, was a devout follower of the Buddhist path. He believed that his work was his practice, that by creating strong and beautiful things, he was bringing good into the world. One day he was called to the home of a man whose wife had just died. "I want you to build a magnificent shrine for her," the grieving man said, his voice choked with sorrow. "The most beautiful shrine you have ever made." The carpenter set to work. He used the finest woods and his most profound skills. But as he worked, he saw that the man was drowning in his own grief. He would just sit, staring into space, not eating, not sleeping. The beautiful shrine, the carpenter realized, would not heal this man's heart. On the third day, the carpenter put down his tools. He went and sat beside the grieving man. He did not speak. He did not offer words of wisdom or comfort. He just sat with him in silent, shared presence. He sat with him for the entire day. The next morning, the man turned to the carpenter, the first spark of life in his eyes for days. "Thank you," he whispered. "Yesterday was the first time I did not feel completely alone." The carpenter did not finish the grand shrine. Instead, he built a simple, strong bench, and he placed it in the garden where the man and his wife had loved to sit, and he knew it was the most important thing he had ever built. This story is a gentle but powerful teaching on the nature of compassionate action. We are often like the carpenter, believing that our value, our way of helping, is in what we can do, in our skills, our solutions, our creations. But the story reveals that the deepest healing we can offer another human being is often found not in our doing, but in our being. The gift of our silent, unconditional, and loving presence can be a far greater and more healing shrine than any magnificent thing we could ever build. The ability to offer this presence to others is born from the ability to find it within ourselves, a truth we discover in a story about a monk who learned that true wealth has nothing to do with possessions. This brings us to the tale of the monk's only possession. A young monk named Kenji was very attached to his one and only possession, a beautifully crafted wooden bowl given to him by his first teacher. He ate from it, drank from it, and carried it with him everywhere. He believed it was a symbol of his spiritual lineage. One day, his monastery was visited by a great and famously eccentric Zen master. The master saw Kenji's deep attachment to his bowl. That evening, the master secretly took the bowl and hid it. The next morning, Kenji was thrown into a panic. His bowl was gone. He searched everywhere, his mind in a state of turmoil. He could not meditate. He could not eat. His entire day was consumed with the loss of his one possession. At the evening meal, the master asked him, "Kenji, you seem troubled. What is the matter? My bowl is gone," Kenji cried. "It was my only possession. I have lost everything." The master then reached into his own robes and produced the bowl. "Is this it?" he asked. Kenji's face was flooded with relief, but then the master did something unexpected. He simply dropped the bowl onto the stone floor, where it shattered into a dozen pieces. Kenji stared, horrified. "You see," the master said calmly, "yesterday you had a bowl, but you had no peace. Today you have no bowl, but you have the opportunity to find a peace that is not dependent on any bowl, which is the greater treasure." This story is a stark and powerful teaching on the nature of attachment. Even a single simple possession, when we invest our sense of security and identity in it, can become the source of our suffering. Kenji's peace was conditional. It depended on the presence of his bowl. The master's seemingly cruel act was actually an act of great compassion. He was breaking not just the bowl, but the student's attachment. He was showing him that true peace, true wealth, is an inner state that is not dependent on any external object or condition. It is a peace that can be present even when our hands are empty. This inner peace is often found when we stop trying to control our world and instead learn to see it with new eyes. This brings us to a tale about a painter who discovered that the greatest artist is not the one who creates, but the one who allows. This is the story of the painter and the spider's web. An artist was determined to paint the most perfect and realistic painting of a dew-covered spider's web. She went out every morning at dawn. She studied the webs with a magnifying glass. She drew hundreds of precise sketches. She was a master of technique, and she was trying to force reality onto her canvas through sheer skill and effort. But her paintings were always a disappointment. They were skillful, but they were lifeless. One morning, exhausted and frustrated, she simply sat in the garden and gave up. She did not try to paint. She just sat. She watched the light of the rising sun as it touched the garden. She felt the cool, damp air on her skin. She was completely present, with no goal and no agenda. Just then, she noticed a large, perfect web stretched between two rose bushes. It was covered in 1,000 tiny, perfect dewdrops, and at that exact moment, the first ray of direct sunlight broke over the horizon and struck the web, and for a single breathtaking instant, every single dewdrop flashed with all the colors of the rainbow, a necklace of 1,000 living jewels. It was a beauty so profound and so fleeting that no artist could ever hope to capture it. And the painter understood. Her job was not to recreate beauty, but to be present for the beauty that the world was offering, freely in every moment. Her greatest art was not in her hand, it was in her eyes. This story is a beautiful teaching on the nature of receptive awareness. We are often like the painter, striving to create perfect moments, to force beautiful experiences to happen. We work so hard at being happy, at being peaceful. But the story reminds us that the most profound moments of beauty and joy in our lives are often not the ones we create. They are gifts of grace that arrive when we are simply quiet, present, and open enough to receive them. The practice is not to try harder, but to see more softly. When we see in this way, we can discover that our greatest struggles are often our most profound teachers. A monk who was ashamed of his own mind learned this lesson from the very thing he was trying to escape. This is the tale of the monk and the restless mind. A young monk was in despair because his mind would not be quiet during meditation. It was a constant stream of thoughts, memories, plans, and daydreams. He felt he was a complete failure. "My mind is like a wild, untamed monkey, leaping from branch to branch," he complained to his master. "I can never find peace," the master said. "Tomorrow when you meditate, I want you to take a brush and a long scroll of paper with you, and your only instruction is this. Every time you have a thought, I want you to draw a single small monkey on the scroll." The monk did as he was told. At first his hand was flying. He drew monkey after monkey, a chaotic jumble of them. But as the day wore on, a strange thing happened. The very act of calmly and non-judgmentally acknowledging each thought by drawing a monkey began to change his relationship to his own mind. He was no longer fighting the monkeys. He was just watching them. He began to see their patterns. He saw the anxious monkeys, the sad monkeys, the funny monkeys. He began to feel a kind of gentle, detached affection for the chaotic energy of his own mind. At the end of the day, he looked at his scroll. It was covered in hundreds of monkeys. But his own heart, for the first time, was quiet. He had not silenced the monkeys. He had simply befriended them. This story is a wonderful, compassionate teaching on the practice of mindfulness of thought. We often treat our own thoughts as an enemy, especially when we are trying to be quiet. We fight them, we judge ourselves for having them, and this just creates more mental turmoil. The Master's brilliant instruction is a form of playful, non-judgmental acknowledgement. By externalizing the thoughts as monkeys, he helped the student to stop identifying with them. The life-changing insight is that you are not your thoughts. You are the quiet, spacious awareness that is able to watch the whole circus of the monkey mind without getting caught in the drama. Peace is found not in getting rid of the monkeys, but in learning to sit with them with a kind and patient smile. This same patient kindness is what allows us to see the world not as a series of demands, but as a place calling for our gentle attention. This is a lesson we learn from a man who believed his importance was in his destination until a small creature taught him about the journey. This is the story of the official and the snail. A very important government official was on an urgent journey to the capital city. He was being carried in a magnificent palanquin by 4 strong servants who were rushing along the path as fast as they could. The official was impatient, his mind full of the important matters of state he had to attend to. Suddenly he shouted, "Stop!" The servants came to a halt. The official got out, his face a mask of annoyance. He had seen a small snail, slowly, painstakingly, making its way across the dusty path, right in their way. "This foolish creature is blocking our path," he said. He raised his foot to crush it, but then he paused. He looked, really looked, at the snail for the first time. He saw the beautiful, intricate spiral of its shell. He saw the incredible, patient effort of its slow, deliberate movement. He saw a whole world of life and purpose, existing right there at his feet, completely indifferent to his own urgent and important journey. He was humbled. He gently picked up the snail, carried it to the other side of the path, and set it down in the soft, cool grass. He then got back into his palanquin. "Walk on," he said to his servants. his voice now quiet and thoughtful. "But walk slowly. I do not wish to miss anything else." This story is a simple but profound teaching on the importance of mindfulness and the relativity of our own self-importance. We are often like the official, rushing through our lives, our minds fixed on our important goals and destinations. In our hurry, we can become blind to the small, simple and profound miracles of life that are right here at our feet. The snail is a great Zen master. It teaches the wisdom of slowness, of patience, and of being completely present for the journey of our own small life. The official's moment of awakening was the moment he was able to step out of his own self-important story and connect with the simple, sacred reality of another living being. It is a reminder for all of us to, from time to time, slow down, to look at the snails on our own path, and to remember that the most important journey is not the one that takes us to the capital city, but the one that takes us into a deeper and more compassionate presence with the world as it is. When we are truly present in this way, we can discover that what we are searching for is not something to be gained, but a truth to be seen. This brings us to a quiet story about a student who was given a single question, and the surprising place he found the answer. This is the tale of the monk and the master's face. A young monk was deeply troubled. He had been taught that his own true nature, his Buddha nature, was perfect, serene, and always present. But his own experience was one of constant inner turmoil. He went to his master. "Master," he said, "I have been searching and searching for my own Buddha nature, but I cannot find it. All I find is my own anxious, confused, and imperfect mind. Where is it?" The master did not answer with a philosophy. He simply looked at the young monk, and he asked a very simple, very direct question. "And who," he asked, "is the one who is looking for it?" In that one simple, reflexive question, the young monk's entire search collapsed. He had been looking for his true nature as if it were a separate object, a thing he had to find out there. But the master's question pointed him back to the one who was doing the looking. He realized that the very awareness that was conscious of the search, the very awareness that was aware of his own confusion and imperfection, that was it. The seeking was the finding. The Buddha nature was not the goal of the search. It was the very light by which he was searching. This is one of the most direct and life-changing pointers in all of Zen. We are constantly looking for peace, for happiness, for our true self, as if these are things we have lost and must find again. We are like someone with a pair of glasses on their forehead, running around the house, looking for their glasses. The master's question is a loving invitation to stop the search and to simply notice the one who is searching. This quiet, simple, and ever-present awareness is the peace we are looking for. It has been here all along, patiently waiting for us to stop looking for it and to simply be it. When we can rest in this simple being, we can find a peace that is not dependent on what the world gives us. This brings us to a tale about a monk who learned that true richness is a matter of the heart, not the hands. This is the story of the beggar monk's offering. A very poor monk who lived by begging was given a single, small, and slightly bruised apple by a kind woman. It was the only food he had for the entire day, and he was very hungry. He was walking back to his simple shelter, and he was thinking about how sweet this one small apple would taste. On his way, he passed a mother with a small child who was crying from hunger. The monk stopped. He looked at the one precious apple in his hand, the answer to his own hunger, and he looked at the crying child. Without a moment's hesitation, he knelt down, polished the apple on his worn robe until it shone, and he gave it to the child. The child's tears stopped, and he began to eat the apple with a look of pure joy. The monk continued on his way, his own stomach empty, but his heart was more full and more nourished than it had ever been in his entire life. He had discovered a profound, life-changing truth. The joy of selfless giving is a food that satisfies a hunger that no apple can ever touch. This story is a simple but powerful teaching on the nature of generosity, or dana. It shows that generosity is not about what we give, but about the quality of the letting go in our own heart. The monk, who had nothing, was able to give everything. His act was a pure expression of compassion, completely free from any thought of himself. And in that selfless act, he experienced a joy and a richness that was far greater than the simple pleasure of eating the apple. The story is a gentle reminder that our own happiness is deeply connected to the happiness of others. When we can let go of our own small, hungry self and act for the good of another, we tap into a source of joy that is boundless and deeply fulfilling. This profound connection is the theme of our next story. It is a tale of a master who taught his greatest lesson, not by what he said, but by what he shared. This is the story of the master's cold feet. A young, earnest monk was the personal attendant to an old and revered Zen master. The young monk was very dedicated, and he was always trying to find opportunities to learn from the master. One bitterly cold winter night, the young monk was meditating in his own cell, which was next to the master's. He was trying to concentrate, but he kept hearing the old master tossing and turning on his simple mat. He heard the old man sighing and shivering. The young monk was filled with a deep sense of compassion. He forgot his own meditation. He went to his own mat, took his own one simple, thin blanket, and he tiptoed into the master's room. The master seemed to be asleep. The young monk very gently laid his own blanket over the old master's cold feet. He then returned to his own cell, and he sat in the cold without a blanket, and he felt a warmth in his heart that was greater than any fire. The next morning, the master called the young monk to him. "Last night," the master said, his eyes full of a deep and loving warmth, "I gave you the greatest Dharma talk of my entire life. Did you understand it?" The young monk was confused. "But master," he said, "you were asleep. You did not say a single word." "The teaching," the master replied, "was not in a word. It was in the coldness of my feet and in the warmth of your own heart." This story is a beautiful and simple teaching on the nature of embodied compassion. The young monk had been trying to find wisdom in his own mind, in his own meditation, but his greatest moment of enlightenment came when he completely forgot about himself and his own practice, and he responded to the simple, direct human need of another. The master's sermon was not a concept, it was a reality. It was a shared experience of cold and warmth, of suffering and compassion. The story gently reminds us that the most profound spiritual truths are often not found in our moments of solitary practice, but in our simple, direct and loving connection with others. This loving connection is what allows us to see the world not as something to be used, but as something to be cherished. This brings us to a quiet story of a monk who learned that the greatest respect is paid not through ceremony, but through simple care. This is the tale of the monk and the wasted water. A young novice monk was carrying 2 heavy buckets of water from the monastery's well. As he was walking, he stumbled, and a little bit of water splashed out onto the ground. He did not think anything of it, but the monastery's abbot, a very old and wise master, who was watching from a distance, called out to him. "Young man," he said, his voice full of a surprising sadness, "why are you so careless with the water?" The novice was confused. "But master, it was only a few drops. The well is full. You do not understand," the abbot said. "You have not just wasted a few drops of water. You have shown a disrespect to the clouds that carried it, to the sky that held it, to the mountain that gathered it, and to the deep earth that gave it to our well. You have shown a disrespect to the person who dug this well, and to all the monks, past and future, who depend upon its gift. When you carry the water, you are carrying the entire universe in your hands. To waste a single drop is to not understand the profound miracle of your own life." This story is a deep teaching on the Zen spirit of gratitude and mindfulness in every small action. We live in a world where we often treat resources as disposable. We do not see the deep interconnected web of causes and conditions that has brought a simple glass of water or a simple bowl of rice to our hands. The abbot's lesson is a call to a deeper kind of seeing. It is the practice of recognizing the sacredness in the ordinary. When we can see the entire universe in a single drop of water, our relationship to the world is transformed. Every action, no matter how small, becomes an opportunity to express our gratitude and our respect for the profound gift of life itself. This same gift is one we often miss, because we believe our real life is somewhere else. This brings us to a tale about a man who searched for a holy land, only to find it in the place he was trying to escape. This is the story of the man who searched for the Pure Land. A devout and sincere man spent his entire life dreaming of being reborn in the Pure Land of Amitabha Buddha. a legendary paradise of perfect peace and beauty. He spent his days chanting the Buddha's name, and his nights visualizing the golden pavilions and the lotus ponds of this perfect world. His own life in a poor and difficult village seemed to him to be a place of suffering and impurity, a place to be endured and escaped. As he was dying, he had a vision. In his vision, he was walking on a long, dark road. Finally, he saw a great, magnificent gate of pure light. He knew it was the gate to the Pure Land. His heart was filled with an ecstatic joy. He was about to step through the gate when the Buddha Amitabha himself appeared before him. "You have been a devout seeker," the Buddha said, his voice like the sound of 1,000 bells. "But before you enter, I must ask you one question. Where have you just come from?" "I have come from the Saha world," the man replied, "the world of suffering. I have come from a poor, difficult and impure village." The Buddha looked at him with a deep and loving compassion. "Go back," he said gently, "and look again." In his vision, the man was sent back, and he found himself standing in his own simple, poor village. But he was now looking with the Buddha's own clear eyes. He saw the way the morning light touched the dusty leaves of the trees. He heard the sound of his neighbor's children laughing. He saw the tired but kind face of his own wife. He saw the incredible, heartbreaking and profound beauty that had been there all along, a beauty that he had been completely blind to because he was always dreaming of somewhere else. And he realized that the Pure Land was not a place you go to. It is a way of seeing the place you are already in. This story is a life-changing teaching on the nature of the sacred. We are often like the man, believing that peace and happiness exist in some other place, in some future time, in a life that is not our own. We are always trying to get to the Pure Land, but the Buddha's final instruction is a call to return our attention to our own ordinary, imperfect and beautiful lives, and to discover the sacredness that is hidden right here, in the simple, overlooked details of our own world. When we can see in this way, we can find a peace that is not dependent on what the world gives us. This brings us to a quiet story of a master who was faced with a great loss, and the even greater gift he found within it. This is the tale of the master's only bowl. The Zen master Hakuin had only one possession that he was deeply fond of. It was a beautiful, ancient and rare tea bowl that had been passed down through his lineage for hundreds of years. He used it every day for his morning tea. One day his young, clumsy attendant stumbled and dropped the bowl, and it shattered on the stone floor. The young attendant was filled with a terror so profound that he was sure the master would banish him, or worse. He prostrated himself before the master, his body trembling. Hakuin came and looked at the shattered pieces of his beloved bowl. He was silent for a long time. Then he turned to the terrified young man. "Do not worry," he said, his voice full of a strange and gentle cheerfulness. "I have been wanting to be free from that bowl for years. Thank you. This famous Zen story is a master class in the art of non-attachment. The bowl was beautiful and precious. The master loved it. But his peace was not in the bowl. His happiness was not dependent on the bowl. Therefore, its loss was not a source of suffering for him. In fact, he was able to see it as a liberation, a release from the subtle burden of owning something precious. This is a profound and challenging teaching for all of us. We all have precious bowls in our lives, the possessions, the relationships, the roles, the identities that we are attached to, and we live in fear of them breaking. The Master's wisdom is to show that there is a peace available to us that is so deep and so unconditional that it can remain unshaken, even when our most precious things are taken from us. This same unshakable peace is the theme of our next story. It is a tale of a monk who was a master of stillness, but who learned his greatest lesson in the midst of a great chaos. This is the story of the monk and the earthquake. A great and famous monastery was known for the profound stillness of its meditation hall. The monks there were masters of concentration, and they could sit for hours in a state of perfect, unmoving silence. One day, while they were all sitting in this deep state of meditation, a massive earthquake began to shake the entire mountain. The ground heaved, the great wooden pillars of the hall groaned and swayed, and tiles came crashing down from the roof. Most of the monks, in a state of pure animal terror, broke their meditation and ran screaming from the hall. But the old abbot did not move. He simply continued to sit in the very heart of the chaos, his posture perfect, his expression serene. When the shaking had stopped, the disciples who had fled returned, their faces full of shame. They found the abbot sitting peacefully amidst the dust and the debris. "Master," they said, their voices trembling, "how could you remain so still? Were you not terrified?" "There was a great shaking," the abbot replied calmly. "I was aware of the shaking. I was aware of the falling tiles. I was also aware of the feeling of fear arising in my own body. But I also knew that I was not the shaking. I was not the fear. I was the silent, unshakable awareness in which all the shaking was happening. The ground was moving, but I was already home." This story is a powerful teaching on the nature of our true refuge. We often seek a refuge in external stillness, in a quiet room or a peaceful place. But the abbot demonstrates that the only truly reliable refuge is the one we find within ourselves. This is the refuge of pure witnessing awareness. This awareness is like the deep, still center of a spinning wheel. The rim of the wheel, the world of our experiences, our thoughts, our emotions, may be spinning in a chaotic blur, but the center is always still. The practice of meditation is the practice of learning to rest our attention in this silent, unshakable center. When we can do this, we can find a profound peace right in the middle of life's greatest earthquakes. When we are rooted in this deep inner peace, we can meet the world with a new kind of heart. This brings us to a simple story of a man who learned the most important lesson not in a temple, but from the creature he was about to eat. This is the tale of the farmer and the fish. A poor farmer had caught a single large fish, and he was taking it home for his family's dinner. As he was walking, the fish, in its struggle for life, managed to slip from his grasp and land on the dusty path. It lay there, gasping for water. The farmer was about to pick it up and continue on his way. But then he looked, really looked, at the fish. He saw its beautiful silver scales now covered in dust. He saw the desperate, silent struggle for breath in its gills. He saw a living being that, like himself, wanted nothing more than to live. And in that moment his own hunger disappeared, and it was replaced by a deep and overwhelming feeling of compassion. He picked up the fish, not to take it home to his cooking pot, but to take it back to the river. He gently placed it back in the cool, clear water. The fish gave a single, powerful flick of its tail, and it was gone. The farmer went home to his family with an empty pot, but his heart was more full than it had ever been before. This story is a simple but profound teaching on the awakening of the compassionate heart, what is known in Buddhism as bodhicitta. This is the spontaneous and unconditional wish that all beings be free from suffering. The farmer's moment of awakening was the moment he was able to step out of his own self-centered needs and to truly see and feel the suffering of another. This is the great turning point on the spiritual path. It is the shift from what can I get to what can I give. The story teaches us that compassion is not a moral duty, it is a source of deep and profound joy. The farmer lost his dinner, but he gained his own humanity. This same human connection is the theme of our final story. It is a tale that brings us back to the simple, profound, and often missed reality of our own shared experience. This is the story of the master's last gift. A Zen master was dying, and his disciples were gathered around him. For 50 years he had been a great and powerful teacher, a figure of immense wisdom and authority. But now he was just a small, frail old man, his breathing shallow. His senior disciple leaned in close. "Master," he whispered, "you have given us so many gifts, so much wisdom. Is there one last gift, one final thing we can do for you?" The old master was silent for a long time. Then, with a great and final effort, he slowly and weakly reached out his own wrinkled, trembling hand. He did not point. He did not make a gesture of teaching. He just held his hand out, open and empty. The senior disciple did not understand at first. He thought it was some profound, final, symbolic teaching. But then he looked into his master's eyes, and he saw not a great enlightened being, but just a lonely, dying old man who in his final moment simply wanted to hold someone's hand. The disciple took his master's hand in his own, and in that simple, silent, and profoundly human touch, the master gave his final and greatest teaching, that in the end there is no master and there is no disciple, there is only this. This shared, fragile and precious moment of human connection. And in that quiet, simple and loving touch, our journey for tonight comes to a close. We have walked with monks and masters, with farmers and kings. We have seen that the greatest treasures are often the most simple, that our greatest strengths are found in our deepest vulnerabilities, and that the peace we are all searching for is not a distant destination, but the very ground on which we are walking right now. The stories are over. Let them go now. Let them dissolve like ripples in a quiet pond. There is nothing left to hold on to, and nothing left to understand. The only thing that remains is the simple, gentle, and profound reality of your own being, resting here in this moment. Return your attention now to the quiet, faithful rhythm of your own breath. Feel it as a gentle anchor in the calm harbour of the present. Let each breath be a soft wave of relaxation, carrying you deeper and deeper into a state of profound and healing rest. The path is complete. The journey for tonight is done. You are home. Thank you for sharing this quiet time. Sleep well. That single final word, everything, is a doorway into the profound simplicity that lies at the heart of the path. It is a truth often found, not by adding knowledge, but by letting go of our own cleverness. This brings us to a quiet story about a student who was a master of words, but a novice in the art of experience. This is the tale of the scholar and the ferryman. A very proud scholar, whose mind was a library of philosophical texts, had to cross a wide river. He hired a simple, uneducated ferryman to row him across. As they set out, the scholar, wanting to display his knowledge, asked the ferryman, "Old man, have you ever studied the great sutras?" "No, sir," the ferryman replied, his eyes on the water. "I cannot read." "Ah," the scholar said with a sigh of pity. "Then you have wasted half of your life." A few moments later, a sudden fierce wind came down from the mountains, whipping the river into a frenzy of dangerous waves. The small boat began to fill with water. The simple ferryman, who had spent his life on this river, was calm. He looked at the scholar, whose face was pale with terror, and he asked a simple question. "Learned, sir," he said. "Have you ever learned how to swim?" "No," the scholar stammered, clinging to the side of the boat. "I have been too busy with my studies." "Ah," the ferryman said with a quiet sadness. "Then you have wasted all of your life." This story is a classic Zen teaching on the difference between conceptual knowledge and practical, embodied wisdom. The scholar's knowledge was vast, but it was useless in the face of a real life and death situation. The ferryman's wisdom was not in his head, it was in his hands, in his body, in his intimate, lifelong relationship with the river. The story gently reminds us that while learning is valuable, the ultimate test of our wisdom is not what we know, but how we live. Can we swim in the often turbulent river of our own lives with a sense of calm and skill? This kind of wisdom is not found in a book. It is cultivated through the direct, humble, and patient practice of being present for our own experience. This same direct presence is the key to seeing the world not as a problem, but as a place of wonder. This brings us to a tale about a man who was burdened by his own perception, and the simple truth that set him free. This is the story of the man who saw demons. There was a man who was tormented by the belief that he was constantly being followed by demons. He would see their shadowy forms in every corner, and he would hear their whispers in the wind. He lived in a state of constant fear. He went to a Zen master for help. "Master," he said, "I am haunted. Please give me a mantra or a ritual to drive these demons away." The master said, "I will help you, but first you must help me to see them. The next time you see a demon, I want you to do something very specific. I want you to pick up a handful of flour, and I want you to throw it directly at the demon's face. Then you must not move. Just watch to see where the flour lands. Do this every time, and then come back and tell me what you have seen." The man did as he was told. The next time he saw a shadowy demonic form lurking by his gate, he threw a handful of flour at it. The form disappeared, and the flour fell upon the gnarled trunk of an old tree. The next time he heard a demonic whisper, he threw the flower, and it landed on a simple bamboo wind chime that was rattling in the breeze. He did this for a week. He threw flour at fence posts, at his own cat, and at a pile of old rags in a corner, and at the end of the week his demons were all gone. He had not driven them away. He had simply seen with his own eyes that they had never been there in the first place. This story is a profound teaching on the nature of projection. Our fears and our anxieties often seem like powerful external forces that are attacking us. But the Master's wisdom is to see that they are often just shadows created by our own mind, projected onto the neutral screen of reality. The flower is a metaphor for the practice of mindful direct investigation. When we are afraid, instead of running from the demon, can we turn toward it with a clear and curious attention? When we do, we often discover that the terrifying monster is just an old tree or the sound of the wind. We learn that we are not the victims of a haunted world, but the creators of our own experience. This same creative power, when used wisely, can transform our greatest sorrows into our deepest strengths. This brings us to a quiet story of a woman who was asked to perform an impossible task and the compassionate wisdom she found in it. This is the tale of Kisa Gotami and the mustard seed. A young woman named Kisa Gotami was lost in a grief so deep it had driven her to the edge of madness. Her only child, a beautiful baby boy, had died. She could not accept it. She wandered from house to house, carrying the small, still body of her son, pleading with everyone she met for a medicine that could bring him back to life. The villagers, seeing her sorrow, sent her to the Buddha. She came before the Buddha, laid her son at his feet, and said, "Lord, they say you are the great physician. Please, give me the medicine that will cure my son." The Buddha looked at her with a heart of infinite compassion. He did not tell her that her son was dead. He said, "I can make such a medicine for you, but to do so, I will need one special ingredient. I need you to bring me a single mustard seed from a house in this village where no one has ever died." Kisa Gotami was filled with a desperate hope. She went from house to house, clutching her small child. At the first house, she asked, "Have you a mustard seed for the Buddha's medicine?" "Of course," the woman of the house said. "But have you ever had a death in this house?" The woman's face grew sad. "Oh yes, my own father died here last year." Kisa Gotami went to the next house, and the next, and the next, and in every single house she heard the same story. A husband, a wife, a child, a parent. There was no home that had not been visited by death. As the day wore on, she began to see that her own deep sorrow was not hers alone. It was a part of the great, shared and universal sorrow of all humanity. Her personal grief began to dissolve into a vast and profound compassion for all living beings. She went to the forest, gently laid her son to rest, and returned to the Buddha, not for a medicine, but with a quiet and an open heart, ready to learn the truth about the nature of all life and all loss. This story is one of the most famous and moving of all Buddhist teachings. The Buddha's instruction was a brilliant and compassionate device. He knew he could not take away the woman's pain with a simple statement. He had to guide her to a direct, lived experience of the truth of impermanence and shared suffering. Her journey from house to house was a profound meditation. It transformed her from a person isolated in her own private grief into a person connected to the great family of all humanity.